Chapter 26, Gideon the Alpha. Realizing that Hui, the leader of the wolf race, had been shot dead by Gideon, all the wolf men in the area surrendered. They refused to keep fighting. Their alpha had been defeated. Gideon gave the order to regroup his team. Luke and the others approached, obedient to Gideon's command as their team captain. All stations, return to the base. Copy, Captain. Bian was still there, still staring at Gideon sharply, overwhelmed by his decision to kill Hui. He had no idea what made Gideon do it, nor did he understand why Hui had chosen to fight him in the first place. One thing's for sure, Hui never showed that kind of beast transformation to anyone unless he saw them as a serious threat. To Hui, Gideon and his team were powerful enemies, ones the wolves couldn't defeat easily. Lena arrived and saw the many corpses of the wolfmen they had taken down. Not a single one was still alive or even clinging to life. Each of them had been shot not just once but with multiple bullets. Lena, treat the wounded wolves. Lyra, help Lena by calming down the rest of the villagers. Luke, help me restrain the ones who surrendered. Don't hurt them, Gideon instructed clearly. Understood, Captain. Lena, Luke, and Lyra quickly followed through with their orders. Lena grabbed a medkit and began treating the injured wolfmen. She needed to perform bullet removal procedures to prevent bleeding and infections caused by the projectiles. Lyra stood and began gathering the villagers, starting with the women and children. They were angry, of course, but they also wanted answers. Why had Gideon killed their people, and why had he made sure Hui was dead? This was where Lyra's role became crucial. She worked to mediate the conflict between Gideon's team and the wolf race. She didn't want the situation to escalate into open hostility. Luke stood beside Gideon. Gideon leaned on him slightly, arms crossed, looking ahead. Around 8 wolfmen knelt on the ground, their hands placed behind their heads in a clear sign of surrender. "What should we do with them?" Luke asked. "We hear what they have to say. Then we decide." Luke nodded. Following Gideon's direct orders, he began questioning each one of the wolves, asking what caused the rebellion, who orchestrated it, and what the goal had been. Thanks to his trained eye and background in psychological observation, Gideon could tell when someone was lying and when they were telling the truth. He watched closely. One of the easiest tells, avoiding eye contact. Out of the 8 wolfmen who surrendered, 3 told the truth. The rest lied. But Gideon didn't care. As long as some of them were honest, their testimonies would be treated as facts. "Release those 3. Detain the rest," Gideon said firmly. Luke nodded and got to work. While they confessed, Bian and his 2 friends stood by listening. The 3 of them were shocked to learn that people of their own race had plotted to kill the man who had saved their village. "I can't believe they did this." Bian turned, noticing how badly Gideon was hurt. He was still coughing up blood, clearly suffering from serious internal injuries from his battle with Hui. But Gideon held on, waiting until Lena was done treating the others. She was busy, her gloved hands stained red from the wolves' blood. Many of the wolfmen had muscular bodies, and the bullets were lodged deep within their tough flesh, making extraction difficult for Lena. "Do you need anything?" Bian asked, uncertain. "Hui is dead. The forest wolf village has no leader. You need to choose a new one soon." "Choose a new leader? That's impossible," Bian replied. "Why?" Gideon asked. "The wolf race didn't choose their leaders the way humans did. Humans used democracy. The people voted. But in the wolf village, things were very different. They chose their leader through battle. That's right. They had to fight. And whoever won the fight would be recognized as the new leader by the entire village. Sure, there were still plenty of strong men in the wolf village. Most had not rebelled. They were young, fast, and capable. But none of them dared to put themselves forward as leader. It was because of their nature, the instinctual dominance of the alpha, and the deep-rooted loyalty that came with it. Only someone who had defeated the previous alpha could claim leadership. Then a challenger would step forward from the villagers. If no one challenged the new alpha within a day, the position would be official. "Because none of them want to fight you," Bian answered. "Them?" Gideon asked. He turned and saw a group of wolfmen gathering in front of him and Luke. But they didn't attack or resist. What they did next was far more shocking. What are they doing?" Luke asked. "No idea." Gideon watched as all the wolf men around him knelt with their heads bowed, paying their respects like loyal knights. Not just them, Bian, the women, and even the children followed suit. He had killed Hui. His strength had far surpassed Hui's. That was why no one dared to challenge him. "You are now the new leader of the Forest Wolf Village, Lord Gideon," Bian said solemnly. Gideon was speechless. They had chosen a new leader solely based on power. Luke chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Guess what, Alpha Gideon?" Luke teased. Lyra walked over, laughing and smiling at Gideon's new title. Lena didn't even glance up. She was still laser-focused on treating the wounded former rebels. Gideon had no choice. If the people of the Forest Wolf Village had made their decision, then he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. With his power and leadership, he could finally begin his true mission, uniting all the mythological races. "Very well. I accept your coronation," Gideon replied. Woof! The wolves howled together that night, so loud that the echo reached all the way to the Kitsune village. Gideon couldn't join in, but he clapped his hands in response. "What's your decision, Lord Gideon?" Bian asked. "Call all the leaders of the mythological races on the southern coast. I want to speak with them." Chapter 27. Next Leader of Wolf Village. "Quite a bold move, huh?" Luke asked. Gideon said nothing, just smiled faintly. Bian carried out the orders of his new leader. No one dared to rebel, and no one questioned him. Everyone followed Gideon's commands, loyal and respectful. There are only two ways a leader earns respect: by being loved or being feared. Gideon's tough personality was shaped by the strict discipline of the U.S. Army. He didn't really know how to be the kind of leader people loved. To him, a soldier's love was shown through obedience and survival. That's why leading through fear worked better for him than trying to be loved. Gideon would make sure they respected him and his team. He wanted them to believe his authority was absolute. Bian led an expedition team to a nearby village of a mythological race along the southern coastline. Gideon was targeting these villages with one goal: to gather allies with the same mission, resisting human colonization. Norton arrived from the north, not alone, but with 10 elite soldiers. One of the Kitsune villagers had gone to inform Norton about the 12 wounded Moko soldiers. They didn't just bring soldiers, they brought horse-drawn wagons too, with empty carts in the back. 3 wooden wagons that could carry all 12 wounded Moko fighters. Norton arrived just outside the wolf village, but hadn't entered yet. He turned his head, clearly noticing something was wrong inside. But he couldn't figure out what. "What's going on here, Commander?" one of his men asked. He stood frozen, shocked, unsure how to respond. His face was still, lips sealed, unable to say a word as he witnessed the tragedy in front of him. "I don't know." Gideon's attention shifted as he saw Lena walk out of the green tent, her hands covered in blood. She took off her white gloves and untied her hair, letting it fall loosely over her shoulders. "Commander Norton?" Lena greeted. "Miss, what happened here?" Norton asked, curious. Lena smiled. She wasn't obligated to answer Norton's question. Instead, she walked beside him, guiding him away from the village. She didn't want him to see the horror inside from the battle the night before. "You came to rescue the 12 Moko soldiers, right?" Lena asked, her M4 rifle still hanging from her neck. "That's right." She wasn't wearing that weapon before. Now she's always got it on her. "What's really going on here?" Norton wondered. They both turned their attention forward. Lying on the open field near the Kitsune village were the 12 Moko soldiers. It was morning. They lay on their backs, white bandages wrapped tightly around their stomachs. Their eyes were open. They saw Norton clearly as he approached. Norton remained silent, stunned but grateful that Lena and Gideon's team had managed to save them. "How are they doing?" Norton asked. "Some of their wounds reopened because they were forced to walk after surgery," Lena replied. "Meaning?" "They haven't fully recovered yet. That's why I asked you to bring the wagons." Norton looked back. He had brought the wagons just as she asked. Lena nodded. The capacity and design were more than enough to carry the 12 injured Moko fighters back to Mishko City for proper care. Lena smiled. One by one, the 12 soldiers were lifted and placed inside the wagons. Though one wagon could carry 5 to 6 people, Norton chose to place only 4 in each for comfort. That way, all 3 wagons could carry the 12 wounded safely. "Where's Captain Gideon?" Norton asked. "He's taking care of something in the wolf village," Lena replied, standing in front of him. "What really happened there?" he asked, trying to understand. Lena smiled again, her eyes closing tightly. "Nothing." 3 days later, the reconciliation process between Gideon's team and the villagers was going smoothly. Slowly, people began to understand the root of the conflict. Gideon couldn't deny that the wolf village had changed since his team arrived, but he had made up his mind he wouldn't take the leadership role of the wolf village. He wasn't one of them. He didn't belong to their race. His team would gather their supplies and head somewhere safer. Is the Kitsune village really safe? Who knows? Gideon couldn't be sure. What he did know was that the Kitsune could end up just like the wolves, conflict born out of clashing interests. If Gideon wanted to stay neutral and avoid personal agendas, then he had to build his own village, his own shelter, one that didn't rely on any other race. "But please stay here, Mr. Gideon. We don't know what'll happen to the wolf village without your team," Bion said. "I know you aren't to blame, but trust is hard to rebuild after what happened. The best thing for all of us is to grow in our own way, on our own terms," Gideon replied. Bion hated to admit it, but he couldn't deny the truth. What the village elders had done to Gideon was beyond forgiveness. Hui even threatened to kill him if he didn't hand over his rifle. That was no longer just a disagreement. It had become a power struggle. "Then where will you go?" Bion asked. "We found a place that suits us. We'll stay there and build our own independent shelter. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome, but they'll have to follow my rules." Gideon's goal was clear: avoid power struggles. If no single race was in control, he could shape the shelter into something that truly worked. Bion sighed and looked around. Many others agreed with Gideon. They knew the wolf race had wronged them. Rebuilding trust after betrayal wasn't easy. Maybe the only way to heal was to walk away. "All right. But what about choosing a new leader?" Bion asked. Gideon walked forward confidently. His fist clenched tightly, aimed directly ahead. Punch! Without warning, Gideon landed a solid blow on Bion's face, knocking a tooth out. Bion staggered back, shocked and furious. He had no idea why he'd been hit. "What the—" Punch. Another punch. This time, Bion didn't just stand there. He got up and fought back. The two of them brawled in the middle of the village, and no one stopped them. Lena was shocked and started to move forward to break it up, but Luke blocked her with his arm. "Stay back. Just watch," Luke said. "But he's—" That's how the captain passes down leadership to Bion. Bion's going to be the new alpha of the Forest Wolf clan. Chapter 28. Start from the beginning. Bion kept hitting Gideon, not caring who he was. Gideon occasionally raised his hand, blocking Bion's punches while still letting himself get beaten up. There was a reason why Gideon was doing this. Lena panicked, Lyra was terrified, and Luke kept his eyes locked in focus. If something happened outside their predictions, Luke would step in to separate them. "Why are you punching me?" Bion shouted angrily. "It's the only way. They choose a leader," Gideon replied. He kicked Bion hard, sending his body flying backward. Luke quickly rushed over to Gideon, whose face and body were covered in bruises. "You all right?" Luke asked. "This is better than taking dozens of bullets." On the other side, one of Bion's friends was calming him down. He also hadn't expected Bion to respond so aggressively to the point of injuring Gideon. Slowly, Bion began to realize what he had just done. He looked forward and saw Gideon sitting on the ground, his face swollen with bruises, Luke beside him. Bion's worry grew. He was afraid Gideon and his team would punish him, just like they had killed the rebel wolves. "What?" "What?" "Bion. You've beaten me," Gideon murmured. "I admit defeat." All eyes turned to Bian, both Gideon's team and the rest of the villagers. Gideon's words carried weight. As a leader, he wasn't supposed to lose in front of his people. But if he admitted defeat, the one who beat him would have to be the new leader. "What do you mean?" Bian asked. Gideon gave a faint smile. He stepped closer to Bian, one arm over Luke's shoulder for support, Luke helping him walk despite the pain that racked his body. Once in front of Bian, Gideon raised his hand, asking for a handshake. Still confused, Bian reached out and shook his hand. "According to your tradition, an alpha who is defeated is no longer the leader of the people. You, with your bare hands, have beaten me. Now, you are the leader of the Forest Wolf clan, Bian," Gideon said softly but firmly. Me?" Bian stammered. Following Gideon's words, the villagers immediately knelt and paid their respects to Bian as their new leader, replacing Gideon. Gideon and the others watched the leadership transfer of the Forest Wolves. He smiled. He had only been their leader for a few days, and he preferred giving the title to Bian. It was because Bian was one of them, while Gideon was not. "Our respect to the new leader, Bian," the villagers declared. Bian was shocked, stunned, confused, and speechless. He hadn't expected to ever become the leader of the Forest Wolf clan, a role that should have belonged to Gideon. But Gideon had analyzed and understood the difference between their races. He worried that keeping the title for himself would cause more imbalance. "Being captain of my own team is more than enough. I don't know what to say, Captain Gideon." "We can talk, leader to leader," Gideon replied. "Yes, you can talk after we treat your wounds, Captain," Lena said as she approached. Gideon chuckled. Luke helped him to the back so Lena could treat him. She pulled out the medkit and began wiping the blood from the cuts on his face. "This is going to leave a scar." "I know." "What were you really thinking?" Lena asked, still worried. "They, the Forest Wolves, will only follow someone strong among them. That's why the fight was necessary, to make Bian look strong. Am I right?" Lena asked again. Gideon nodded. "Yes." She dipped cotton in antiseptic and cleaned the wounds on his face. Luke and Lyra stood nearby, unsure what to do next. They had already moved their supplies out of the wolf village, and they couldn't stay here much longer after the recent conflict. They also didn't fully trust the kitsune, even though Mitsuko had helped them a lot. "What's our next move?" Luke asked. Gideon stayed quiet, letting Lena tend to the wounds on his temple and chin. He knew the conflict and changes in the forest. Wolf Village meant they had to take action. They couldn't stay, not after the bloody fight 3 days ago. The villagers' trust in his team was split. Some supported them, others opposed them out of fear and hate. To prevent further conflict, Gideon decided they had to leave. He turned to Lena, his gaze making her pause in confusion. "What?" she asked. "Do you remember that human village we visited before?" Gideon asked. "Are we evacuating there?" Lena replied. "That would be better. Kitsune and forest wolves are different from us. I don't want another conflict. We start again from scratch, build a permanent shelter there," Gideon said loud enough for Luke and Lyra to hear. "Luke, Lyra, head to Norton's camp and let them know. I'll probably need a horse cart to move our supplies." "Understood, Captain," they answered. Now, only Gideon and Lena remained in the wolf village. Slowly, the wolves who had rebelled 3 days ago were recovering. They could walk, though not yet work normally. Bian approached Gideon. "What will you do next?" Gideon looked up and smiled. "We can still work together, but I won't be staying in the wolf village. I don't want to trouble you. The best option is to move somewhere I believe is safe," Gideon said. "Don't worry about them. You can stay here if you want," Bian offered, but Gideon gently refused. "My decision's final," Gideon said, standing up. He placed a hand on Bian's shoulder, drawing the man's full attention. "I still need you for the plan to unite the mythical races, even if my team and I don't live here." "Please help me talk to them," Gideon said. Bian stayed silent for a moment, then a wide smile spread across his face. He would carry out Gideon's request. He would show that the forest wolves still treated Gideon's team well, no matter the situation. "All right, I'll help you, Captain Gideon. Gideon nodded. He knew he still needed them to keep the area around his future shelter stable. Peace had to be built by uniting all the mythical races, though he knew it would be hard and complicated. Luke and Lyra met with Norton. After hearing Gideon's request, Norton had no objection. He ordered his men to take their horse cart to the Kitsune village to load up the team's supplies. Norton went with them, riding his armored horse. He led the cart until they arrived, and his eyes widened in shock at Gideon's battered face. "What happened?" Norton asked. "Power struggle." "No big deal," Gideon joked. "Can you help me out?" Gideon asked. Luke already explained everything. "We'll help move your supplies to that village," Norton said. "Since that village is still part of Moko, you can come and go freely without worrying about anyone suspecting you," Gideon added. Norton nodded. He had already told his soldiers it was a reconnaissance mission, though in truth, it was to help Gideon's team. Hearing that, Gideon smiled in relief. Luke and Lyra started loading supplies onto the cart, with a few Kitsune men helping them. Lady Mitsuko saw the activity and walked out to meet Gideon, who was being helped by Lena. Her face showed the same shock as Norton's when she saw his condition. "What happened?" Mitsuko asked. "Nothing to worry about, Lady Mitsuko," Lena said. "It looks like we won't be staying in the Kitsune village. We're moving to the human village in the forest," Lena explained. Mitsuko nodded. It was a bit disappointing, but Lena and Gideon must have had good reasons, especially since she had seen the fight herself. "Very well, but if you need anything, we're ready to help," Mitsuko said. "Thank you, Lady Mitsuko." "So shall we leave now?" Norton asked, and Gideon cleared his throat. They said their goodbyes to the wolf and Kitsune villages, then climbed into the horse cart and set off for the human village. The main problem there was bandits. There was a good chance they would come again, and the village needed protection. Gideon and his team could handle that. "Once we get there, what's our first step?" Luke asked. "Build a vast perimeter, put up watchtowers, activate detection sensors, handle sanitation. There's a lot we'll have to do," Gideon said. "It's like starting over, am I right?" Luke asked. Gideon cleared his throat. "Yeah, we start from the beginning." Chapter 29. New Shelter for Gideon's Team. After making sure all the logistics had been loaded, they set out, leaving the wolf village and the Kitsune village for the human village deep in the forest. Norton knew exactly which village it was. He was the one who had sent Moko's soldiers there after receiving a report from someone. It was Namora village, with Noelle as the village head after her husband passed away. The village had a population of about 2,000, most of them farmers and loggers. Namora was the only village bordering the mythical lands, the Wolf Village and the Kitsune Village. Norton explained that he had once proposed turning Namora into the kingdom's southern military base, but the idea had been rejected without any explanation. Now, Norton had no problem letting Gideon and his team settle there. They didn't have a proper place to stay, and their conflict with the Wolf Village had already put them on high alert. The horse-drawn carriage stopped near the village gate. Several villagers paused and stared at the distinctive look of the soldiers' carriage. Their expressions turned tense and fearful. After all, royal soldiers were known for their arrogance and abuse of power. If one of them wanted to eat, the village had to provide it. If they wanted to sleep, the village had to give them a place. And if their commander wanted a woman, the village had to offer one to him. That was why the villagers weren't exactly happy when they saw Moko's soldiers arrive. One of the villagers ran to Noella's house, telling the old woman about the soldier's carriage parked at the gate. Clicking her tongue, Noelle stepped outside, her face annoyed. When she arrived at the gate, she was surprised to see that the visitors were the two people who had come to the village some time ago, the ones who had saved the village from a bandit attack. Aren't you the man from that time?" Noelle asked. Gideon nodded. It wasn't just Gideon. Noelle also saw Lena, Lyra, and Luke. Many others in brown-green uniforms similar to Gideon's were there, but their outfits were clearly different from Moko's soldiers. It was obvious to her that the four of them were not part of Moko's army. Norton dismounted and walked toward Noelle, handing her a pouch of coins. Noel opened it and saw that it contained 10 gold coins. What? What is this? Noel asked. They are honored guests of mine. Provide them with a place to stay. They will help protect your village, Norton explained. Noel turned her head. Gideon looked beaten up, his face covered in bruises. Luke and the others were busy unloading supplies from the carriage, boxes of MREs, ammunition, rifles, and more, enough to sustain the 4 of them. Of course, we'll prepare a place for them, Noel replied, handing the pouch of gold coins to one of the men who would be responsible for making sure Gideon and his team had a house. It seems those bandits haven't been bothering you anymore, huh? Gideon asked. Noel turned to him with a smile. That's right. Ever since your fight with Moko's soldiers on the forest dirt road, no bandits have dared to come. They might be scared of your skills. Thank goodness, said Lena. Realizing that Gideon's team needed shelter right away, Noel used the gold to rent 4 rooms at the village inn. The villagers also helped carry the supplies inside. Everyone treated them warmly. They knew who Gideon's team was and what they had done for Namora village. Welcoming them was the same as gaining their protection. For now, you'll stay here until your house is finished. You don't mind, do you? Noel asked. Gideon shook his head. Not at all. Thank you. You're welcome. Welcome to Namora village. Once the door was closed, the entire team gathered in Gideon's room with the supply crates stacked nearby. Luke walked over to the window, noting that they were on the 2nd floor. You told Lena to jump from a building like this. You're crazy. Luke joked. Gideon smiled. So, is this our permanent shelter? Luke asked. Gideon cleared his throat. He preferred staying in a human village over the wolf and kitsune villages. The racial differences here still played a big role in social interactions. People in this world cared about that. Yes, until I decide otherwise, this is our shelter, Gideon replied. Then what do you want me to start with? Luke asked. Set up a perimeter and a watchtower. That way we can keep an eye on the area before anything bad happens, Gideon said. Got it. I can do that. He glanced to the side, studying Lena carefully. He needed Lena and Lyra's skills to discuss matters with the villagers, especially regarding hygiene and sanitation. It was crucial for maintaining the villagers' health. If their water was clean, the village could thrive. Lena and Lyra listened to what Gideon had to say. Both women nodded in full understanding and obedience to their captain's orders. But Lena pointed something out. Before we start discussing this, we should observe their habits first. That way we'll know exactly what needs to be corrected or stopped, Lena explained. I agree. Explaining without seeing the actual situation is like drawing conclusions without understanding, Lyra added. All right, I'll leave that to you two. Then what will you be working on? Luke asked. Gideon stayed silent. He opened his bag and took out his green entry permit. The Moko army camp had been disbanded. It was time for him to go to Mischo City and see the situation there, especially to find a blacksmith who could help them make bullets. I'm going to the city. Are you sure? Lena asked. Gideon cleared his throat. We need to know where that blacksmith is. We need a solid decision on ammunition production. Only by going there can I confirm it, Gideon replied. But it's dangerous for you to go alone. Misco City is still Moko territory. They're hostile to us. Don't you remember? Lena said. Gideon smiled. He appreciated his team's concern for him, but he reminded them that he was ex-Delta Force. No matter how tough the mission, he could handle it. I can manage on my own. I'll go with Norton. He can help me. Lena fell silent, then sighed, her hand resting gently on the back of Gideon's. Be careful, Gideon. Chapter 30. First meeting of 7 races. 1 week later, Namora village. Gideon's condition was slowly improving. His wounds had dried, and his bruises had faded. He could see Luke and the others already busy with their assignments. Luke had started gathering the young men to help with the perimeter and the watchtower. Working with fellow humans felt far more comfortable for Luke than working alongside wolves. For now, they had built a defensive perimeter with a palisade and planted landmines. Lena and Lyra hadn't moved to the next stage yet. The two of them were still working together, analyzing the habits of the villagers. They had found several issues, such as the habit of rarely bathing and generally poor sanitation. They both realized the village was far from any river or spring, making it difficult for people to wash themselves regularly. Lena began considering the idea of digging a well for them. The villagers already had a well, but it was dirty and contaminated with trash and animal carcasses. They had no other source of clean water besides that single well. Gideon stepped out of the inn. He turned his head and noticed several people hanging from the gallows. They were the bandits who had been caught by the villagers days ago. It seemed Noello wasn't joking about enforcing the laws in the village. Silva looked toward the inn. She saw another man in a tactical shirt and black cargo pants step out. Everyone knew he was Gideon's team leader. She gathered her courage to approach Gideon, unsure of what to say. She still remembered the near-death experience of almost being assaulted by two soldiers. After witnessing Gideon and his team fight, she was convinced they were the ones who had saved her that day. "Why were you able to defeat Moko's soldiers so easily?" Silva asked, catching Gideon's attention. "Excuse me? What is that black metal you use?" Silva asked. "Is it magic? How does it work?" she pressed. She needed the information to confirm her suspicions. If the way it worked was simple and didn't involve magic, she could be sure Gideon's team had been the ones to save her. Gideon wasn't carrying his M4A1 in hand anymore. The situation was calmer compared to before. No more village tensions, and threats from bandits or Moko soldiers had faded. The SIG M17 was enough for their personal defense. No need to carry the much heavier rifle in daily activities. Silva's eyes fixed on the black metal object holstered at Gideon's belt. Gideon noticed her staring at his handgun. He unfastened the holster and drew the weapon, holding it in his right hand. "This is a gun, not magic. It works simply. You load bullets inside, then the gun ignites a primer that burns the gunpowder. The bullet is propelled forward at high speed by the explosion," Gideon explained. "In short, this gun works based on the natural properties of materials, no magic or anything like that." "Can you show me?" Silva asked. "Sorry, I only use it when there's a real threat." "Like when bandits come to threaten the village?" Silva asked. Gideon cleared his throat in agreement. He reholstered the handgun and glanced to the side, spotting someone approaching from the south. It wasn't a human, it was a wolffolk. He came with another of his kind, both heading straight toward Gideon. "Wolffolk?" Silva asked. Gideon narrowed his eyes and walked toward the village gate, raising his hand to signal them to stop. The two wolffolk nodded. They were here to deliver a message to Gideon and his team. "What is it?" Gideon asked. "Leader Bion sends a message. The 7 southern mythical races have gathered," one of them replied. So the talks about uniting the mythical races have already begun, huh? "He asks for your presence there to reaffirm your idea and convince the 7 leaders of the mythical races," they continued. Gideon fell silent. He turned back, watching Luke and the others working on their tasks. "What's your name, miss?" Gideon asked. "Silva. I'm Silva." "Miss Silva, can you help me?" Gideon asked. "Help with what?" He explained the help he needed. He wanted Silva to go around the village and meet each member of his team, easy to recognize by their appearance, and deliver his message to them. That way, the 3 wouldn't worry if he suddenly disappeared without explanation. "And what's in it for me?" Silva asked. "I'll teach you how to use this gun," Gideon replied. Silva became visibly excited. She nodded and left the village gate, while Gideon walked away with the 2 wolffolk toward the wolf village, where the meeting would be held. Along the way, the 2 wolffolk said little, keeping quiet until they arrived. Just before entering the village, Gideon stopped when Lady Mitsuko came to greet him first. "How have you been, Mr. Gideon?" Mitsuko asked warmly. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." The 2 wolffolk went ahead after Gideon said he would speak with Mitsuko first. They didn't mind, leaving him with the Kitsune leader. "So, which mythical races are here?" Gideon asked curiously. "Kitsune, forest wolf, mountain lion, birdfolk, mermaid, satyr, and lamia." "Lion. Don't the wolves hate them?" Gideon asked. Mitsuko shrugged. I don't know, but they still invited them here. Gideon stayed silent, his gaze fixed ahead where many guards from 6 different races stood around the village hall, a cone-shaped building serving as the venue for their first meeting. I must admit, your idea of uniting all the mythical races is brilliant, but it's far from certain. What do you mean? Gideon asked. You'll find out soon enough. Let's go inside. He nodded. Gideon and Lady Mitsuko walked into the wolf village together. Their arrival drew the attention of the guards outside the cone-shaped building. Aside from the wolves and kitsune, the other races glared sharply at the human. The door to the building opened inside. Gideon saw and felt only silence. No conversations at all between the leaders of the southern mythical races. Looks like each race holds its own grudges against the others. This is harder than I thought. All eyes turned to Gideon as he entered alongside Lady Mitsuko. They hadn't expected a human to attend the meeting, and Gideon could feel the resentment in their stares, especially from the mountain lion leader. Human, barked a muscular man with a lion's face. What's the meaning of this, you stinking wolf? You invited a human here? The man snapped, looking at Bian. He's the one who came up with this idea. Let me introduce him to you, Bian replied, rising from his seat and stepping toward Gideon. Lady Mitsuko took her seat among the leaders. Some were puzzled by her closeness to the human, while others didn't mind. It wasn't strange given the man's good looks. The kitsune valued beauty and handsomeness. This is Gideon. He and his team built the water wheel. They have done much for both the wolf village and the kitsune village, Bian said. Kitsune village, they echoed, turning toward Mitsuko. Do you remember the red butterfly curse? Mitsuko asked. He and his team stopped it without magic. And let me tell you all, Bian continued, stepping forward to address the leaders. He and his team stopped the Moko Kingdom's invasion in a single night, Bian said firmly. The room erupted in shock, eyes wide, jaws clenched. To them, he was just an athletic man whose build was nowhere near that of the mountain lion leader. Yet somehow, he had defeated thousands of Moko soldiers in one night. Impossible. A skinny man like that couldn't have killed thousands of Moko's soldiers in one night. The mountain lion leader roared. It's natural for you to doubt me. That's because you haven't seen how they fight. Fight? The lion-faced man asked in confusion. I'm certain that once you see their fighting style, you'll believe me. Chapter 31, The Lamia's Problem. That's enough, Bian, Gideon said, patting Bian on the shoulder. There was a reason why Gideon stopped Bian. The idea of uniting the mythological races came from one shared thing, suffering. He was sure they had also experienced the oppression of humans for a long time, proven by their first reaction when they saw him. I'm Gideon. I'm the one who proposed the idea of uniting the mythological races, Gideon said loudly. There was no welcome, only cold indifference. They thought they shouldn't even be here, listening to meaningless chatter from a human, a race that had always oppressed them. My team and I come from a different world. We have no affinity here, and we're hated by Moko. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Have you heard that saying before? Gideon asked. Silence, absolute stillness, no response from them. They might have been listening, but none of them were actually focusing on the human speaking. Mitsuko glanced sideways, realizing that Gideon had just hit his first obstacle in building his idea of a mythological kingdom. Even so, she admired that he chose to talk to them rather than use their guns. That's a wise move, winning someone's heart through words, so they respect you, not fear you because of a weapon. No, the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy, roared the leader of the mountain lions, Aslan. You're being too harsh, Lord Aslan. Give him a chance, said a woman with arms shaped like bird wings, the leader of the birdfolk Nuka. Humans have caused damage and broken the original agreement. Why should we trust him? Aslan demanded. That's because I'm not a human from this world. I have nothing to do with the Moko Kingdom or any other kingdom, Gideon replied. Then that's it. You're an outsider, so stay out of our mythological affairs. Mind your own business, Aslan snapped. Aslan stood up and started walking out of the room. Gideon didn't try to stop him, but Bian did try to convince him to return. Still, It was Mitsuko's words that made Aslan pause. Tell me, mighty Lord Aslan, do you have a problem in your village that's too difficult for you to solve? Mitsuko asked. The man with a lion's face and muscular body turned, staring at Mitsuko with his sharp predator's eyes. What do you mean, woman? Aslan asked. Gideon and his team managed to drive off the Moko Kingdom's invasion forces and end the battle in the southern region. The wolf village was protected. They also came to save many Kitsune villagers who were under a deadly curse. The Kitsune village has recovered. You know, both of those things were nearly impossible to achieve, yet they succeeded, Mitsuko said. Are you trying to convince me again? Spare me your nonsense, Kitsune, Aslan barked. That's not what I mean. Mitsuko stood and walked down from the podium. She turned and stood beside Gideon, her eyes fixed forward, watching as many eyes in the room finally shifted toward her. What I mean is, if your village faces something that seems impossible, maybe Gideon and his team are the solution for you. We invited you here only to introduce our leader and our idea. We're not forcing you to join right now. You can decide later. It can't be denied Gideon and his team's presence brought blessings to the wolf and Kitsune villages. It's not impossible he could also help yours. What? Gideon blurted, grabbing Mitsuko's hand. Mitsuko turned and smiled, saying nothing, but her eyes told Gideon more than words could. Slowly, Gideon began to understand her way of thinking. All right. Good, Sir Gideon, Mitsuko said warmly. This meeting is over. If you need anything, you know where to find us. One by one, they rose from their seats and left the hall. Aslan was the first to leave, exiting the wolf village, followed by the other race leaders. But one leader stayed seated in the cone-shaped wolf village hall. Gideon looked up, clearly seeing a half-human, half-snake woman. Mitsuko whispered to him. Lamia race, she murmured. Lamia? Gideon asked. Yes, that's us. Gideon narrowed his eyes, focusing on the snake woman's sad face, her long black hair falling down her back. If I trust what that woman said, can I trust you? The Lamia woman asked. What's wrong? Gideon asked. I'm Sivir, leader of the Lamia races. Compared to the wolf and Kitsune races, we're few in number, Sivir explained. Our race lives in a swamp village east of the wolf village. The river in the swamp is the most important part of our ecosystem, she said. But not anymore. Calm down, I'm sure Gideon and... I'm not finished, Sivir interrupted Mitsuko, making her shift in irritation. Sivir slithered down from the podium to stand right before Gideon, Mitsuko, and Bian. Her golden brown, vertically slit pupils caught Gideon's attention. He never thought he'd meet a snake woman in person. Our river has turned black, with a foul, stinging smell. When we tried to use it, it only made our children weak and die. Since then, the Lamia population has dropped drastically and is now on the brink of extinction. There are many reasons why a river could turn polluted, human activity, or natural causes. I can't conclude anything without seeing it myself. Do you know what caused the river to change like that? Gideon asked. Our guess, it comes from ancient ruins. Ancient ruins? There's a destroyed city near the swamp, full of stones and moss. The river flows through the city. When we checked the river upstream, it was fine, but after passing through the ruins, everything changed. Did you check inside the ruins? Gideon asked. It's forbidden for us to do so. Every Lamia who goes there never returns, Sivir said. We're desperate and don't know what to do, the woman lamented. Gideon rubbed his chin. If Sivir was telling the truth, then something in those ruins had contaminated the river and affected the Lamia settlement. His initial guess was fungi and moss growing in the damp areas around the swamp and ruins. If what Mitsuko said about you is true, can you help us? Sivir asked, her face filled with sadness and desperation. How long would it take to get there from the wolf village? About 1 to 2 days on foot, Sivir answered. He nodded, falling silent for a moment to think of the best way to help them. This problem would require 2 stages, observation and action. In total, it might take 1 to 2 weeks to solve Lamia's problem. What are you doing for water in the meantime? Gideon asked. We take spring water from the mountains, about half a day away. How is it Gideon, Mitsuko asked. I'll need to observe the location and the situation, analyze the water samples, and identify the root of the problem. If I find the solution, I can help them, Gideon replied. Really? Sivir asked, her eyes lighting up. I can't guarantee with absolute certainty, but I'm confident I can help you. For now, go back to your village and tell your people. I don't want to cause any negative perception when my team arrives. Stop using the river water for now, stay away from its banks, and don't breathe in anything coming from it, Gideon instructed. All right, I understand. Chapter 32, Two Teams, Different Missions. Getting an answer from Gideon was enough to put Sivir's mind at ease, even though he didn't know whether Gideon could actually help his race or not. Still, if they truly managed to solve the problem, there was no doubt that Sivir and the Lamia race would agree to the proposal of uniting the mythological races. There was nothing more to discuss. Sivir said his goodbyes to Gideon, Mitsuko, and Bian. He made it clear that the Lamia could settle temporarily in the wolf village if they wished. However, the relationship between the two races wasn't exactly friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. The Lamia chose to return to their swamp village and wait for Gideon and his team there. I told you, it's not easy to convince all of them, said Mitsuko. Gideon gave a faint smile and nodded. You're right. They have different principles when it comes to humans. Especially the mountain lion race, Gideon added. Bian chuckled softly. This was the first time he had seen Gideon looking so sour and confused. Still, he reassured Gideon that the plan to unite the mythological races would succeed. Even so, Bian knew that uniting the mythological races would take a long and complicated process. But that was still far better than forcing them to join through threats and intimidation. So what are you planning to do now? Bian asked. Gideon fell silent. His original plan had been to go to Misko City to see the situation there. But today's meeting of the 7 mythological races had delayed his plans for a bit. He could handle everything by delegating tasks. Gideon had already prepared another plan to deal with the current situation. He would discuss his new plan with his team while listening to their opinions. I'll talk about the results of this meeting with Luke and the others. In 2 or 3 days, they'll take action. All right. If you need help getting there, the Forest Wolf race can assist, Bian offered. Don't forget the Kitsune race. We can also help take care of the villagers with herbal medicine and our magic, Mitsuko added, folding her arms. Gideon nodded. These were his trusted non-human friends, at least for now. Hearing them offer help as leaders of their races made him feel relieved and grateful. Thanks, my friends. Sorry to trouble you. After parting ways with them, Gideon headed north, leaving the Forest Wolf village. 2 men from the Forest Wolf race walked with him to make sure he was safe, even though they knew Gideon was stronger than both of them combined. As they traveled along the dirt road through the forest, Gideon kept thinking about the Lamia village's problem. The river's polluted and it reeks. What could be causing it? Gideon? Lena called from the village gate, standing with Lyra and Luke. Gideon turned and smiled. Lena waved at him. Since they were already close to the village, Gideon told the 2 wolfmen they could head back. They didn't need to escort him any further. They nodded and said goodbye before leaving Namora village. When Gideon reached the village gate, Lena asked him the obvious question. How did the meeting go? She asked curiously. We should talk about it in the inn room. Lena glanced briefly at Lyra and Luke, who both nodded in understanding. They probably thought that the results of the 7 mythological races meeting involved important, confidential, and possibly dangerous information if overheard. Gideon was just being cautious. He and his team entered the inn, went up to the 2nd floor, and into his room. Luke closed the curtains. Lyra locked the door. Everything was secure. I met with the leaders of the 7 mythological races, and their response was bad. Bad? How bad? Luke asked. 2 races hate me, 2 races support me, and the other 3 are still undecided. That's unexpected, Lena replied. Which races showed up? Gideon began recounting all the details of his experience at the meeting. He also told them about the races that had come to the wolf village. Many of them were surprised to see Gideon, and also about how close the wolf race and the kitsune were with him. His story ended with the case of the Lamia race and their polluted swamp river. Luke narrowed his eyes. Lyra rubbed her chin, and Lena put her hands on her hips. There are many possible causes for river pollution. On Earth, it's usually just two things, trash or factory waste, Luke explained. But there's no factory here, and if there is trash, it would be organic waste, Lyra replied. Besides, fungus and moss wouldn't pollute a river, Lena added. They said the source of the pollution is the ancient ruins. We have to investigate there, Gideon said. Put your work here on hold. Luke, Lyra, head to the wolf village and tell Bian I sent you to the Lamia village. Just do an initial observation for now, Gideon instructed. Take water samples. Identify any symptoms the Lamia villagers have. Pay attention to the vegetation around the river. Understood, Captain. Luke and Lyra replied, standing straight and saluting. Lena and I will go to Mischo City to observe the city and find a blacksmith who can help us, Gideon added. And what about the village's defense? Luke asked. Let Commander Norton's elite troops handle it. Lena nodded, and so did Luke and the others. Gideon told Luke and Lyra to take M4A1 rifles just in case they encountered enemies during their observation. It was different for Gideon and Lena. They only carried SIG M17 pistols for self-defense. Carrying M4A1s would make them too suspicious. You might also want to change your clothes, Captain, Luke suggested. Clothes? Gideon glanced down at the tactical shirt he was wearing. Lena was wearing the same. The Moko forces know our uniform pattern. Changing clothes will hide your identity. I have no idea where to get clothes. There's no clothing store here, Gideon replied. Relax. I've made a new friend here. The next day, Luke and Lyra carried out their orders. Luke handed over perimeter line duties to the village youths, while Lyra delayed her sanitation problem investigation. Gideon had visited Commander Norton's elite troops camp. Norton welcomed him, and they shared a drink. Gideon explained his plan, and Norton happily agreed to help. The result? 300 elite soldiers arrived in the village, guarding it without intimidating the townsfolk. Norton and Gideon would be away in the city for some time, so the troops set up camp around Namora village. Thanks to the clothes borrowed from Luke's new friend, Gideon was now disguised in brown slacks and a plain black shirt. Lena did the same. Silva lent her a simple dress. Even though their outfits were different, they still carried their SIG M17 pistols concealed in their clothes, easy to access. Take care of yourselves, Gideon told Luke and Lyra. Of course, we'll be back safely. After saying goodbye, they headed south toward the wolf village to begin their journey to the Lamia village. Gideon and Lena remained in the village, preparing to leave for Mischo City. Norton stepped out of his tent, dressed in a majestic red noble outfit, looking more like a dignified politician than a fierce commander. So, are you ready to go? Norton asked. Who are you? Gideon joked. Haha, I'm Norton Ashfield, head of the Ashfield noble family, Norton replied. Nobleman, huh? Gideon remarked. Mischo City isn't a big city. Don't expect to find too much there. I understand. A soldier came, leading 2 horses for Gideon and Lena. Gideon was surprised, though not entirely, since he'd ridden a horse a few times before. But Lena... Wait, can we take a carriage instead? I can't ride a horse, Lena admitted. Really? All right then. Another soldier brought over a carriage. One soldier took the role of coachman, while Norton, Gideon, and Lena sat in the back. Once everything was ready, the carriage moved at a steady pace along the forest dirt road toward the north, toward Mischo City. Chapter 33. Life inside Medieval City. The trip to Mischo City took 6 to 8 hours by horse-drawn carriage. Gideon and Lena sat next to each other, facing Norton, who sat across from them. Do you have an important business that made you decide to go to the city? Norton asked. Yeah. We need detailed information about many things we can't get from the mythical race village, Gideon replied. You don't have to worry. Mischo City is led by Viscount Duncan. They're under my authority, Norton said. What do you mean? Lena asked. Norton explained a lot about the noble hierarchy to Gideon and Lena. Noble titles could be granted by 3 different ranks: Earl, Duke, and King. An earl could promote someone to baron or viscount, but an earl was appointed by a duke. A duke had the authority to grant the titles of earl and marquess. The king had full authority to grant any noble title. In practice, though, the king usually granted only earl or marquess titles directly. For baron and viscount, it was left to each earl with the duke's approval. Ashfield, Norton's noble family name, held the rank of earl. He ruled over a southern territory in the Moko kingdom, but that didn't make him a marquess. There were only 2 marquesses in the Moko kingdom, stationed at the northern and western borders. Both ruled strategic regions with a higher status than earls. But Norton wasn't greedy. As commander of Moko's infantry, he could have requested a promotion to marquess. He refused. That would divide the nobility and destabilize politics, which in the end would hurt common people the most. Gideon listened carefully. These noble titles, they feel familiar. I think I've heard them in a movie before. He didn't expect this fantasy world to copy the same noble concepts. That's the noble hierarchy of the Moko kingdom, Norton concluded. Do other kingdoms copy this system? Lena asked. Norton cleared his throat. Yes, the Sisila and Luth kingdoms copied this noble structure too. Do each of these noble ranks have their own authorities? Gideon asked. I don't think we have enough time to get into that. Norton glanced out the front carriage window, clearly seeing the massive stone walls and gates protecting Misjo City, like a giant fortress. Gideon and Lena looked in the same direction. Their carriage was approaching the fortress, where a long line of carriages stretched toward the city's south gate. Guards in green armor stood checking each visitor's entry permit plate, making sure their requirements were met before letting them in. The perk of Norton's noble rank meant he didn't have to wait in line, a fast-track lane. The carriage slowed when one of the guards stepped in front, blocking the way. This is Earl Ashfield's carriage. The coachman handed Norton's Earl plate to the guard, without even touching it, just glancing at it. The guard's face went tense. Nervously, he quickly opened the way for Earl Ashfield to enter the city. Your noble plate, Commander, the coachman said, handing it back to Norton through the carriage window. That's nobility for you, Norton said, aware he could enter the city with almost no inspection. Gideon was impressed, but he still wasn't used to the idea of nobility. He had nearly been offered a noble title by the king through Norton if he and his team agreed to join Moko. Gideon refused because of conflicting principles. If he joined, Moko would have an easier time invading the mythical race village, and they'd push for the use of firearms, something that could be dangerous for this world. The carriage passed through the gate's tunnel and into the city. Gideon and Lena turned their heads to the side, eyes widening at the sight of city life and architecture inside the walls. The scene reminded Gideon of Europe's Renaissance era, with old-fashioned, modest clothing worn by the townsfolk. This really is a fantasy world. Norton noticed Gideon's reaction. He ordered the coachman to stop. In his opinion, it would be much more enjoyable if Gideon and Lena explored the city on their own. Take this, Norton said, tossing a pouch with 20 gold coins. Gideon caught it. What's this? Money. You'll need it. 1 gold coin equals 10 silver coins, and 1 silver coin equals 100 copper coins. Do you understand? Norton asked. Gideon cleared his throat briefly. He knew what Norton meant by giving them the pouch and stopping the carriage. Exactly. Norton was letting them explore the city without him tagging along. Gideon didn't mind, and neither did Lena. Guard your money. A pickpocket's hand is faster than light magic. He and Lena got out of the carriage. Norton and the coachman drove off, leaving them behind. Gideon took Norton's advice seriously. He had no experience in a city like this. Where should we go? Lena asked. Gideon stayed silent. Let's start walking. Focus on the goal. Finding a blacksmith. Got it, Lena said. They walked carefully on the neatly paved stone road, hexagon-shaped blocks under their feet. People bustled past in both directions, not suspecting Gideon and Lena were outsiders. Their clothes blended in perfectly. Lena turned her head, noticing the line of shops along the street: tailors, bakeries, newspapers, toys, even brothels openly accessible to anyone. Gideon's focus was different. He noticed merchants unloading goods, but that wasn't what caught his eye. It was the people wearing chains around their necks and ankles. Is that slavery? He stopped walking, eyes narrowing toward a small, dim alley with damp surroundings. Lena turned to see him stopped and approached curiously. What's wrong? She looked in the same direction. She heard a woman crying and a man's grunts from inside the alley. As her eyes adjusted, she was shocked to see a man raping a woman. What shocked her even more was, That's a Kitsune race woman? Lena asked, stunned. She was furious, her anger boiling at the man's disgusting act. She almost drew her handgun before Gideon stopped her. Lena was taken aback. Why are you stopping me? She demanded. Look at her neck and ankles. Those chains are binding her. She might be a slave. A slave? Lena repeated. We're in a fantasy world. Nobles, medieval architecture, magic, armored soldiers. Maybe slavery is normal for them here, Gideon said. Even so, we can't just leave her. She's still a woman from the Kitsune race. Lady Mitsuko would be furious if she saw this. Lena muttered bitterly. I know. Gideon stepped aside toward a merchant unloading goods, not into the alley. There was a chance the Kitsune girl being assaulted was one of his slaves. Is that girl your slave? Gideon asked, drawing the attention of a bald, overweight man. The man gave him a sharp look, then glanced toward the alley, where one of his carriage drivers was finishing his fun. Yeah, she's mine. Why? The man said coldly. I'll give you 1 gold coin if you hand her over to me. Gideon said firmly. You want to buy my slave 2 gold coins? The man snapped. 1. She's a woman. Not much use for you when you need heavy lifting for your goods. Ch! The bald man realized the Kitsune girl was too weak for heavy labor. He'd bought her a week ago, and she couldn't even lift a box of bread. He kept her only because his driver liked her. But human appetites change fast. Soon enough, the driver would get bored. Fine. Give me the money. Gideon cleared his throat, signaling Lena to go into the alley and get the girl. He opened the pouch, pulled out a gold coin, and handed it to the man. The man tossed him the key to her chains. Deal done. Gideon had successfully freed her. Lena emerged, holding the Kitsune woman in her arms. She looked about 18, far too young to bear such a cruel reality. Her body was filthy, her fur matted, her face thin, her clothes torn and stinking. She had clearly been treated horribly. She buried her face in Lena's chest. Lena's nurturing instinct took over, stroking the girl's hair to comfort her. It worked, easing the girl's anxiety. Let's find an inn and let her rest. Chapter 34. Bullet and Magic. They found the nearest inn from their starting location. It had 2 floors. The first floor was for regular rooms, while the second floor had special rooms. The only differences were the interior, quality, furniture, and room size. Gideon booked one of the special rooms upstairs. It was spacious, with a large bed, its own bathroom, and a private balcony. It was perfect for them, even though the price was quite steep for just 1 night, around 5 silver coins. Lena stepped inside and looked around. The interior was fairly classic, with most of the furniture made of wood. She didn't expect much more, considering this was a fantasy world with a time period similar to the medieval era. Their purpose for staying here wasn't just to let the Kitsune girl rest. They also needed a safe place where no one could overhear their initial plans. Gideon decided this room was perfect. Lena let the Kitsune girl soak and wash herself. The girl nodded, still wondering why a master like Gideon and Lena were being so kind to her. When the bathroom door closed, Gideon remained standing in front of the bed, where Lena sat cross-legged on the edge. There's a chance other races are suffering the same kind of slavery, Lena said. Yeah, but there's not much we can do. To free them all, we'd need a huge amount of money. Gideon sighed, glancing toward the balcony that faced the city's main street. The noise and bustle of the crowd reached all the way to their room. For some reason, Misko City felt even more crowded than cities back on Earth. Let's set the slavery issue aside for now. We still haven't completed our objective, Gideon said. Are we splitting up? No, that's dangerous. You can't walk around this city alone. I'm worried about you. I'm a soldier. Even though I specialize in medical work, I'm trained in hand-to-hand combat, Lena explained. Follow my orders, Lena. I'm your captain, Gideon replied, making Lena fall silent. Honestly, I hate being underestimated like this. She had always proven she was more talented than most men. But this was different with Gideon. For some reason, she obeyed, even though she didn't like the feeling of him underestimating her abilities. To her, it didn't mean Gideon didn't trust her. It meant he cared about her safety in an unfamiliar place. Her cheeks flushed. She lowered her head, not knowing how to respond. Why does hearing him forbid me so firmly make my heart race like this? I understand, Captain. When she's done, the three of us will go find a blacksmith, Gideon explained. Lena smiled in agreement. She didn't mind waiting until the Kitsune girl finished cleaning herself. Gideon kept watching the city's main street as if he were deep in thought. The bathroom door opened. The girl stepped out, her face flushed. The sound made both Lena and Gideon turn to look. To their shock, she came out completely naked, using her hands to cover her breast and private area. Lena's eyes went wide. She quickly grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around the girl. Gideon's eyes widened too, and he reflexively turned away, cheeks red, acting awkward. Lena shot him a sharp glare. What did you just look at? Lena demanded. Nothing. Is she covered now? Gideon asked cautiously. She is. He took a deep breath and slowly turned back around. The Kitsune girl was now sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket tightly around herself. She had arrived wearing nothing but rags, completely unfit to wear. It was only natural she had nothing else to change into. We forgot to buy her clothes. Gideon and Lena decided to head to the nearest boutique from the inn to buy something for her. She didn't need anything fancy, just something simple like what they wore. The girl stayed in the room, ordered by Gideon not to leave until they returned. She nodded obediently and stayed seated in the same spot. Luckily, Lena was there to help choose an outfit for her. Gideon bought it for 12 copper coins. When they returned to the inn, Lena showed the clothes to the Kitsune girl with excitement. Her eyes sparkled. This was the first time she'd ever received decent clothes like other townsfolk. What's your name? Gideon asked. Aina, the Kitsune girl replied. Aina. How did you end up in slavery? Bandits kidnapped me when I was kid. They sold me at the slave market. Kid? How old were you? Lena asked curiously. 7. What? Gideon and Lena exclaimed in unison, eyes wide. Neither of them expected Aina to have been a slave since the age of 7. It was horrifying. The people in this city were truly insane. Lena felt a pang of sadness and pulled Aina into a hug, feeling her suffering. Aina was still in shock. She had never imagined she'd be bought by such kind masters. Gideon stepped closer and gently patted Lena's shoulder, his expression full of optimism. Don't worry, you're safe with us. Aina smiled and nodded, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. She was truly rescued, and she could finally go home someday. Lena wiped her tears and promised to protect her from anyone. Once Aina was taken care of, the three of them left the inn and headed toward the main street. Gideon still didn't know the exact location of a blacksmith shop in this city. Are you looking for something, Master? Aina asked. Yes, I'm looking for a blacksmith shop. I know where it is. Follow me, Master. Aina took the lead while Gideon and Lena followed. They walked until reaching a crossroad where she turned right. They stopped when they reached the adventurers' district, full of taverns, inns, brothels, equipment stores, and blacksmith shops. Right then, Gideon and Lena noticed displays of magic equipment. Some adventurers were even showing off simple magic skills like water balls and fireballs. Can they all use magic? Lena asked. Not all of them. Only those blessed with a dominant affinity can use certain magic, Aina explained. Seems like you know a lot about this city, Aina, Gideon said. Of course, Master. I've lived here for 11 years. I know the ins and outs, Aina replied. This was lucky. Getting Ina was like getting a treasure chest full of city knowledge. Lena tugged on Gideon's hand, pointing toward a blacksmith shop to the right. Gideon nodded. They had finally found their destination. "Welcome," said a tomboyish woman with red hair, standing behind the counter with a smile and a scar on her forehead. "Can I help you with something?" she asked. "Do you take custom orders?" Gideon asked. "Custom? Like what?" She tilted her head in confusion. Gideon reached into his holster, pulled out his handgun, and removed the magazine. He placed a single 9mm bullet on the counter, making her look even more puzzled. The woman picked it up. It felt light and cold in her palm. She admitted she had never seen anything like it before. "Father, are you there? Come take a look at this," she called out. A moment later, a muscular man in a tight brown shirt and black trousers came out, carrying a hammer. "Ever seen anything like this?" she asked. The man squinted as she placed the bullet in his hand. He leaned in, studying it closely. It almost looked like a small bean. "I have no idea. What can this thing do?" he asked. Gideon glanced at Lena. She nodded knowingly, then pulled out her SIG M17 and attached a suppressor. Once it was secured, she aimed to the side, switched off the safety, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The suppressed shot sent the bullet flying into one of the iron armors displayed on the wall. Luckily, the projectile didn't go through the wall. It got lodged in the armor instead. Both the man and his daughter looked shocked. There was now a small hole in the best iron armor they had ever made, all caused by that little iron bean in their palm. "What? What did you just do?" the man stammered. "Are you interested in helping us?" Chapter 35, The Sora Blacksmith Family. "I don't know how to make this," the man replied. Gideon fell silent. It was natural for the man to say he didn't know how to make a bullet like this, considering he was born and raised in a fantasy world more familiar with swords and arrows. Still, Gideon was willing to help him if the man truly believed he could make it. "What's the strongest metal you have?" Gideon asked. "We have plenty, but to make a bullet like this, I think it needs to be a strong metal with a light mass." "Can you show us that metal?" Gideon asked, and the man nodded. He went back into the forge to bring out 2 samples of metal suitable for making this bullet. The tomboyish woman was still standing behind the counter, waiting for her father to return with the ore. Not long after, the burly man returned carrying 2 different wooden boxes. Inside each box was a different type of ore. The first box contained Ethereum, the second contained Mithrolite. Gideon narrowed his eyes, not knowing their exact differences in properties and durability. But in terms of color, they were very different. Ethereum was silvery white, while Mithrolite was deep green. Ethereum is usually used to make strong swords, and Mithrolite as well. "But I don't know if either of these can be shaped into this thing," the man said. "Do you want to take this challenge or not?" Gideon asked. The man went quiet for a moment, looking down at the 2 metals he brought. His family's financial situation was worsening, and they hadn't been making much money lately. Gideon came with an interesting offer to make a weapon never before imagined. But seeing Gideon's unassuming appearance, the man felt doubtful about this custom order. "Are you from a noble family?" the burly man asked, wanting to be sure. Gideon was silent for a moment, then shook his head. He made it clear he wasn't a noble, nor was he rich, but the power he held could rule the entire world. "No, but my power could rule the whole world. You could become famous," Gideon replied. "Sorry, sir, I can't risk my valuable metal on someone whose status is unclear." Gideon froze for a moment, then chuckled quietly, realizing his attempt had hit a dead end. "Right. He doubts me because I have no title, no noble status." To him, the man's attitude was understandable. He was a service provider. A craftsman needed to be sure of a client's guarantee. If Gideon didn't give him something as collateral for production, the burly man wouldn't help him. "All right, I understand," Gideon said. "But can't we at least try it first, Dad?" the red-haired tomboy asked. "No, Sora, they promised us nothing. We must not be fooled by their nonsense." Gideon's attention shifted to Sora, the ponytailed tomboy. She seemed to believe he wasn't a fraud, and she also looked genuinely interested in the bullet Gideon was talking about. "How skilled is she?" Gideon asked, pointing to Sora. "She She's the best blacksmith in this district. I raised her myself, the burly man explained. Interesting. How do I hire her? Gideon asked, surprising both Sora and her father. Hire her? Are you trying to enslave her? The man snapped, and Gideon narrowed his eyes. What? Of course not. Her talent would be wasted if she became a slave. The burly man kept staring at Gideon sharply, trying to figure out what he intended for his daughter. Even so, this was the first time he felt intimidated in return while trying to threaten someone. Gideon was using his facial expression to intimidate the man. I will never hand her over no matter how much you pay, the man said firmly. That's because she looks just like her mother, the burly man murmured, making Sora's eyes well up with tears. Her mother had died 5 years ago, when Sora was 14, due to a severe illness. Since then, Sora had stayed in the shop to help her father, either selling goods or forging swords. Thanks to that experience, Sora became skilled in making swords and armor. Her first sword sold for about 40 copper to an adventurer. That adventurer had fallen for her and promised to marry her someday. Letting Sora go with Gideon meant letting go of his wife's memory. The burly man didn't want that. He didn't want to be lonely. Gideon and Lena were touched by the closeness between father and daughter. Hearing this made Gideon hesitate to take Sora away from her father. Instinctively, he reached for the dog tag always hanging from his neck, containing the faces of his wife and daughter, whom he missed dearly. Gideon closed his eyes, feeling a wave of sadness because even now, he still hadn't found a way back to Earth. All right. I won't force you. How much metal do you have? Gideon asked. A lot? Why? The man replied. What do you use in explosive bombs? Gideon asked. The burly man stiffened, unsure why Gideon would ask that. Many blacksmiths refused to make bombs. Gunpowder was expensive, highly flammable, and could ignite easily. I stopped making bombs, but we used fuses to trigger the explosion. A fuse, huh? Bullets don't use fuses. Looks like making the primer will be tricky. What's your name? Gideon asked. I'm Jack. All right, Jack. I get it. I'll come back with the details of what the bullet should contain. Listen, I'm not going to help you understand. I don't know what this thing is, and I'm not getting any guarantee from you. So stop trying to push me. Gideon sighed. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a coin pouch. He placed 10 gold coins on the counter, enough to shock both Jack and Sora. 10 gold coins was an enormous amount of money, equal to 100 silver or 1,000 copper coins. With 10 gold coins, Jack could pay off nearly half of his family's total debt. 10 gold coins? Jack asked, stunned. That's your payment. I'll be back, and you will help me. Do you understand? Gideon said firmly. Who are you really, sir? And one more thing. Gideon raised a finger, drawing both Jack's and Sora's attention. Once you've agreed to help me, you cannot tell anyone about this bullet. If you leak it, your head will end up like that armor. Chapter 36. Line of Bullet. Getting a real threat from Gideon terrified Jack. He and Sora had made that armor themselves, using the best materials they could find, stuff that was nearly impossible to damage with any weapon. But today, that confidence was shattered. The small object in Gideon's hand was able to pierce the armor's wall. It didn't need much metal, just a small piece was enough. Jack could already imagine the horror of Gideon's weapon if it were ever used against Moko soldiers or adventurers. How is it? Lena asked as Gideon glanced back. He's on board, but he has no idea what components are inside this bullet. Do we need to head back to Namora and bring the bullet's blueprint? Lena asked. It seems so. Breaking down this bullet is going to be tough. What kind of bullets are we making? Lena continued. For now, 5.56 millimeters and 9 millimeters. Got it, Captain. Gideon was done with his business at Jack's blacksmith shop. He said his goodbyes and was about to leave until a gang of thugs came barging in, bumping into him, making his eyes narrow. What is it, Gideon? Lena asked. Wait. The 5 thugs shouted at Jack, all of them in t-shirts and leather jackets, holding wooden clubs and spiked iron rods. Gideon could feel the threat in their presence. Did you forget? Today's the deadline for your debt payment. The boss wants all of it paid, one man barked. Please tell Lord Excel I can only pay half for now. I'll try to settle the rest next month. Jack pulled out 10 gold coins he had just gotten from Gideon. Gideon narrowed his eyes. The chains of debt had dragged Jack into poverty. What? That's not enough. Lord Excel wants full payment, interest included, the thug said, still taking the money anyway. We don't have anything else. Please, give us more time. Some of the thugs looked around at the swords and armor hanging on the blacksmith's walls, most of them old, dusty, and completely unappealing to knights or adventurers. They wondered why Jack was even still in business when customers rarely came in. Their attention then shifted to Gideon, Lena, and Ina. Lena caught their sharp stares and readied herself, hand sliding behind her to grip her SIG M17, safety off. Are you one of his customers? The thug asked. Yeah, Gideon replied. Ha, are you stupid? He and his daughter are the worst blacksmiths in this district. You'll only get rusty, junk swords from them. We didn't come for swords, Gideon said. Then why? You don't have the right to know. You're not part of the shop staff. The thug's eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed. He hadn't expected anyone to talk back to him or embarrass him in front of others. You? Do you even know who I am? He asked, pointing his spiked iron rod at Gideon. Jack saw the situation turning dangerous for his shop. He stepped out from behind the counter, trying to diffuse the tension. Get out of my way, you piece of trash, the thug barked. He's new in town. He doesn't know you. Please, forgive him, sir, Jack said. Gideon froze, eyes widening in shock as Jack came forward to stand between him and the thugs. The man lowered his head until he was bowing deeply to them, throwing away his pride to protect his new customer. Ha ha ha, stomp. You're nothing but a lowborn. Your place is in the dirt. The thug jeered, his 4 friends laughing at the sight of Jack bowing for mercy. The thug raised his foot and stomped on Jack's head while he was still bowing. Sora saw it, and rage surged through her. Pure hatred. Her fists clenched. She wanted to punch the man humiliating her father. You can't do that to my father, Sora screamed. But the thug's grip was too strong. She was trapped. One of them roughly tore her clothes, exposing her chest. The gang roared with laughter, enjoying the chance to humiliate Jack's family. Gideon's expression hardened. He reached into his pocket, gripping his SIG M17 tightly. Magazine loaded, safety off. Lena mirrored his movement with her own handgun. Ina, wait outside. Lena, 5 targets. You're cleared to fire. Copy, Captain. Lena responded firmly. Suppressors on. Gideon screwed the suppressor onto his SIG M17. He stepped forward, aiming it directly at the thug's face. The man laughed again, mocking the strange black iron toy in Gideon's hands, something they'd never seen before. You gonna kill me with your weird little iron stick? The thug sneered. Bang! Gideon pulled the trigger, igniting the primer of the 9mm round, setting off the gunpowder and sending the bullet flying at high speed. It tore through the thug's head, piercing his brain and killing him instantly. 1 down, 4 more, Gideon said coldly. Lena raised her rifle and dropped the other 4 with precise shots to the chest or head, instantly killing. 3 down, 1 more, Lena called. Gideon strode past the pale, shocked Jack, whose eyes were wide with fear. If he could fulfill Gideon's request, he might just be the only blacksmith who's ever made a weapon of mass destruction. Sora was trembling, hands and legs shaking in fear at the sheer power of Gideon's weapon. Stop, the last thug holding Sora stammered. We only came to collect Jack's debt, that's all. I don't care about that, Gideon said calmly. But you insulted the blacksmith I chose. You insulted Jack's pride. You assaulted Sora. That's enough reason for me to kill you. I'm part of Baron Excel's family. If you... Bang. A clean headshot cut him off mid-sentence. He dropped dead, joining the other bodies as blood pooled across the blacksmith's floor. Sector clear. Weapon low, Gideon reported. Lena quickly moved to cover Sora's exposed body and led her to the back room to change clothes. Gideon turned to help Jack to his feet, engaging the safety on his SEG M17. The tension in the air began to ease. What have you done?" Jack asked, still staring at the corpses. "Are you scared?" "Yes. They're part of Baron Excel's group." "Of course I'm scared." Gideon smiled, patting Jack's shoulder to reassure him. They deserved it, regardless of their status. And besides, Gideon had friends far more powerful than a mere baron like Excel. "If you're scared, you can move and come with me to Nemora village. I promise, no one will hurt you there." Jack went quiet. He hadn't made much profit in years living in the city. Too much competition with newer, better innovations. He thought hard. Maybe this customer's offer could change his life completely. He wouldn't know unless he tried. "How is it interested?" Gideon asked. "I'd have to pack my things. That could take a while." "Don't worry. I've got a friend who can help you," Gideon replied. Gideon glanced past Jack and saw Lena returning with Sora, now dressed again. Sora ran to her father and hugged him tightly. Lena stepped closer to Gideon. "All right, close your shop. You're coming with me." Chapter 37. Earl Ashfield and Viscount Duncan. Jack and Sora turned their heads, releasing their father and daughter embrace. Both of them looked into Gideon's eyes, curious about where he was going to take them. Gideon and Lena had already stepped outside, but Jack was still confused. Gideon smiled, clearly telling him that he would take Jack and Sora to meet his noble friend. "My friend will help you." Jack remained silent, but Sora convinced herself that Gideon would surely be able to help them, no matter what happened. After all, Gideon and Lena had already helped her family get rid of the debt collectors who had been oppressing them. Sora tugged on her father's hand, heading out wearing the simple clothes they already had on. In the end, Jack agreed. He would follow them. He closed the shop and began walking behind Gideon. Gideon introduced himself to Jack, and so did Lena. Jack was glad to have customers like Mr. Gideon and Miss Lena. "Where are we going?" Jack asked. "Can you show me the way to Viscount Duncan's residence?" "Viscount, is Lord Duncan your friend?" Jack asked, shocked. "No, but my friend is there waiting for me." Jack grew even more confused. Gideon's face showed seriousness, his eyes fixed and unwavering when talking about this friend. Proof that he wasn't lying at all. Even so, Jack was still curious and cautious. Who could Gideon's friend be, someone with the authority to stay in Lord Duncan's residence? Does he have a nobility rank higher than Viscount Duncan? The burly man pointed the way for Gideon and Lena to go to Viscount Duncan's residence, which was in the northern part of the city, close to the main square and the Mischo Knight Monument. Jack and Sora took turns walking ahead, guiding Gideon, Lena, and Ina toward the place. They moved along the city's main street, occasionally stepping aside to avoid horse-drawn carriages coming from both directions. The closer Gideon got to the main square, the more people he saw gathering. Sora glanced back and explained why. "They're preparing for the city's annual Harvest Festival." "Harvest Festival?" Lena asked. "That's right. Farmers will open stalls around the square, selling their crops at low prices as a form of gratitude," Sora answered. "Does the city government help too?" Gideon asked. "Yes. The city government buys half of the farmers' total harvest, so the prices can be kept low." "An interesting festival," Lena remarked. Jack stopped walking. He raised his hand and pointed ahead, right at Viscount Duncan's residence. He told Gideon that it was close to the city square. From where Gideon stood, he could see Norton Ashfield on the balcony with Duncan, holding a glass of wine while watching the bustling city center. Wearing a red nobleman's outfit made Norton easy to recognize. "Let's go." Jack nodded and pushed forward into the crowd again, while Gideon held Lena's hand and Lena held Ina's. That way the three of them wouldn't get separated. After about 15 minutes in the crowd, Gideon and the others arrived at the 5-meter-high iron gate, the entrance to Viscount Duncan's residence. The guards in green armor approached, not to ask their business, but to drive them away. "Stay away from this area, you lowborns," one of the guards barked. "Tell Earl Ashfield that Gideon is here to see him." "Huh, are you crazy?" He would never know you. He's a high-ranking noble, and you're just a commoner, the guard scoffed. Just tell him. Seeing Gideon's stubbornness, another guard finally agreed and went inside to inform Earl Ashfield about a man named Gideon. Upon hearing the name, Norton quickly left Viscount Duncan's residence. Duncan, curious, followed Norton to meet this man named Gideon. From a distance, Norton Ashfield approached, still holding his glass of wine. The guard who had mocked Gideon earlier looked stunned, his eyes wide as he realized Norton Ashfield had come to answer Gideon's call. The gates opened. Gideon smiled and extended his hand. Although Norton's rank in the city was far above Gideon's, the Earl still greeted him warmly. He even offered Gideon his wine, which Gideon declined. Norton nodded. He noticed the burly man with a woman beside him and assumed Gideon had found his blacksmith. "So you found him, huh?" Norton asked. "Yes. Something happened that was out of my plan. I need your help, Earl Ashfield." This was a surprise for Jack, Sora, and Aina. Gideon had not been lying about having a noble friend. Jack had assumed Lord Duncan was that friend, but he was wrong. Gideon's friend was an Earl, Norton Ashfield. "Come in, we'll talk inside Viscount Duncan's residence," Earl Ashfield offered, and Gideon did not refuse. Norton didn't say much to Duncan about Gideon. Telling Duncan about Gideon would be the same as revealing his betrayal of King Moko. He still needed his noble status to help Gideon. Without it, Gideon would struggle to expand his power. Even so, Viscount Duncan showed signs of discomfort toward Gideon, not because of his closeness with Earl Ashfield, but because of Gideon's status as a commoner. Gideon and the others entered Viscount Duncan's residence. Jack, Sora, and Aina waited in the lavish guest room, filled with expensive furniture and served with food by the household servants. Gideon and Lena went to the backyard, speaking privately with Norton in a safe place without Duncan. "Does Duncan know about me?" Gideon asked. "No, Captain Gideon. He doesn't," Norton replied. "Good. Keep your noble status. I need it." "Of course, Captain Gideon. If I can help you through my Earl title, I'll gladly do it," Norton said. "So, what happened?" Gideon took a deep breath and began explaining the situation that had happened to Jack and Sora, who would become his team's personal blacksmiths. He explained the debt they owed to Baron Excel. "Baron Excel, easy, I'll handle it," Norton said. "I also need your help with something else." He went on to explain that Jack and Sora needed a horse-drawn carriage to move all their belongings from the shop. They had agreed to relocate to Namora village and forge bullets for Gideon there. Gideon was sure they could make the bullets his team needed. "Easy. I can take care of that," Norton replied. "When will he be packing his things?" Norton asked. "I'll suggest they leave tonight. I'll also be returning with them. Our business in the city is done." "All right. I'll have my men bring the carriage there." "I'll also go meet Excel to settle your blacksmith's debt," Norton said. "Thank you. Don't forget your promise to me, Captain Gideon," Norton said, narrowing his eyes. "You must help me restore Moko's glory. I know that's going to be a long process. Be patient, Earl Ashfield." Chapter 38. New Villagers. Their discussion ended that afternoon. Gideon and Lena went back to putting together a plan to return to Namora village. But before that, he had a few things to take care of first. One of them was helping Jack and Sora pack their belongings. That was the most important thing. The two of them stepped into Viscount Duncan's residence. In the main hall, they saw Jack and Sora enjoying some light snacks served by the attendants. Seeing Gideon walk in, Jack and Sora immediately stood up, as did Aina. "How did it go?" Jack asked, looking worried. "Start thinking about the important things you want to bring with you. Earl Ashfield is willing to help you," Gideon said. "He'll also help your family pay off the debt to Baron Excel," Gideon added. "What? B. But that's really not necessary. I can pay it off myself." Gideon smiled. Aside from his skills as a blacksmith, Jack also had a good heart. He was certain Sora had learned that kindness from Jack and their late mother. Earl Ashfield arrived, walking in alongside Viscount Duncan. Gideon turned his head slightly and continued. It wasn't easy convincing him, but Earl Ashfield's generosity really is something else, said Gideon. Jack and Sora were moved by Norton's actions. To Norton, it might have been a small matter, but to Jack, the help was like lifting a crushing weight from his life. Now he knew exactly who he wanted to work for. He pulled Sora along toward Norton, instinctively kneeling and giving heartfelt thanks over and over. Earl Ashfield was caught off guard, then glanced briefly at Gideon. Gideon gave a nod. Norton had to accept their gratitude. Jack and Sora had just set aside their pride and ego for the sole purpose of thanking him. Norton crouched down and let Jack and Sora stand. He said Gideon had told him a lot about Jack's shop and his family's situation, and that he was willing to help them. "Your only job is to follow his orders," Norton said firmly. "Oh, of course, Lord Ashfield. I'll follow every word from Sir Gideon," Jack replied. With that done, Gideon said his goodbyes, thanking Viscount Duncan for welcoming them, even though they were nothing more than commoners in his eyes. "A friend of Lord Ashfield is my friend as well. I'm glad Lord Ashfield could help with your troubles," replied Liam Duncan, the man in the green noble robes of a viscount, smiling with his long black and purple hair flowing down. The guards escorted Gideon and the others outside. Once the door closed, Liam exhaled and turned to the side. Norton was still smiling for no apparent reason. His usual firm stance of refusing strangers seemed to vanish with the arrival of this man named Gideon. "Is he a friend of yours?" Liam asked. "You could say that. He saved me." "Saved you? You're the Moko infantry commander, and I don't see him as the typical knight." Norton chuckled, patting Liam's shoulder before turning away. "You just don't know Lord Duncan." Gideon and the others made their way out of the bustling city square. They parted ways at a street intersection, but Gideon planned to return later that night to help Jack. "All right, thank you so much, Sir Gideon." "Of course." The orange glow in the sky slowly faded with the passing time. Oil lamps lit up along the main street, and the lights from the houses illuminated the city buildings. A cool breeze swept in from all directions, bringing a calming, peaceful feeling to the night streets. Gideon and Lena finished packing their belongings. They hadn't brought much to begin with, but Lena had insisted that Gideon buy a few things, including clothes. For future disguises, she didn't want to borrow other people's clothes anymore. They bought clothes for the entire team, 3 sets for each member. That's why Gideon had to pack before heading to Jack and Sora's shop. They left the inn and walked down the city's main street. Ina walked right beside Lena, and Lena kept holding Ina's hand warmly. Passing through the city intersection, they spotted 2 horse-drawn carriages sent by Earl Ashfield. One of the soldiers in red armor turned his head and saluted Gideon. "Captain," the soldier greeted. Gideon gave a nod. When they arrived at Jack's blacksmith shop, Gideon could clearly see Jack and Sora hauling wooden crates full of forging tools and iron ingots. "Need a hand?" Gideon asked. "No need, Sir Gideon. This is the last one," Sora said. Sure enough, the first carriage was already packed full with tools and metal. There was no space for passengers in it, so the second carriage had been set aside for them. Jack loaded the last crate into the carriage and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had been working non-stop since the afternoon. They finished just before midnight. Without wasting any more time, both carriages rolled out of the city through the southern gate. The inspection wasn't as strict as when they had entered. The guards only came over to take a look at the cargo. "Where are you headed?" asked a gate guard in green armor. "Nimora. Private blacksmith work order." Seeing no signs of ill intent from the coachman, the gate guard allowed the carriages to pass. Gideon could finally breathe a little easier. They were now out of enemy territory. Jack noticed Gideon exhaling slowly. He had no idea what was on Gideon's mind. His identity was still unclear to him. But he had only just met Gideon, and he didn't know what kind of man he truly was. Jack wasn't foolish enough to demand answers or pass judgment right away. Better to let time show him what Gideon was really like. He hoped the man's true nature was as good as what he'd shown today. During the trip, Jack and Sora fell fast asleep from exhaustion. Gideon stayed awake, even as Lena dozed off with her head resting on his shoulder. He was still thinking about his mission, about everything. He hadn't found a single lead on how to return to Earth, no magic that could make it possible. But if he did find one, he wouldn't hesitate to ask for help in using it. 6 hours later, the carriages stopped right in front of the village gates. Gideon woke the others. They had arrived, and to Jack and Sora the village felt peaceful. Fresh air, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves drifting in the wind. It was a calm and soothing scene. "We'll be staying here?" Jack asked. "Yup. I'll talk to Noel to let you stay," Gideon replied. "And since there's no blacksmith here, you could be the only one. They don't use swords, shields, or armor here." "Then what could I make?" Jack asked. "I don't know. Maybe hammers, sickles, crowbars, things like that. You could start with tools." Jack nodded. That really was the most practical suggestion for his new situation. Making tools for the villagers was far better than making swords or armor for them. "Most importantly, don't forget our deal," Gideon said, patting Jack on the shoulder. "Of course I won't forget. Just tell me what parts you need, and I can make them overnight." "Ha ha. That's great. But no need to rush," Gideon said. While they were still talking, Silva approached Gideon. She wasn't here to welcome him back. She was here with urgent news. She arrived out of breath, and Gideon's attention went straight to her. "What is it?" he asked. "My mother, she's fallen ill. Please help me." Chapter 39. Luke and Lyra Observation Result. Lena overheard the conversation. She stepped closer to Gideon and Silva's eyes shifted toward her. "I'll check on her," Lena replied quickly. Gideon turned to look at her and nodded. Since Lena was the most skilled in this area, letting her treat Noel was the best choice. "You take care of her." "I'll help Jack," Gideon said firmly. "Understood, Captain." Before heading to Noel's house, Lena went into the inn to grab her medkit. It was important for making an initial diagnosis of Noel's condition. She also asked Silva to explain all the symptoms her mother had shown. Meanwhile, Gideon unloaded Jack's belongings from the carriage. There were quite a lot of them, and he didn't know where to store them. The house for Gideon's team was still under construction, and he didn't want to leave the items outside. In the end, Gideon decided to take Jack and Sora to the inn with their belongings. He would pay for their stay himself. For now, his main focus was making sure they had a temporary place to live. Once Noel recovered, he would speak to her about it. "Those things, did you bring a blacksmith, Mr. Gideon?" an elderly villager asked. Gideon turned and nodded, introducing Jack and Sora to him. They greeted each other warmly, and the old man smiled wide. "Well, that's a relief. Most of our farming tools are dull and rusty," the old man said. "I can help you," Sora offered, making the old man chuckle and nod. "There's an old, empty house that used to belong to a blacksmith. The owners left the village 3 years ago. Maybe you could stay there," the old man suggested. "Really?" Jack asked, pleasantly surprised. "Of course, Miss Noel is sick right now, but I'm sure she'll allow it. The village needs a blacksmith." Jack felt like he had stumbled upon unexpected treasure. He never thought he and Sora would be welcomed so warmly by the villagers. "If I had insisted on staying in the city, I probably never would have known about this village or the needs of its people." For Gideon, the news was a relief. He no longer had to worry about finding a place for Jack and Sora, nor spend money on an inn room for them. The old man pointed toward an old house, its front yard overgrown with weeds, wooden walls rotting, and the roof full of holes. Even so, it was still in good enough shape for them to live in with some repairs. Jack and Sora would just need to clean and fix it up to make it livable. Jack looked over at Gideon, eyes glassy with emotion. Gideon had changed his life. Gideon noticed Jack's gaze. "What? You need my help?" "No, I'm just grateful we met." "You've changed our lives," Jack said. "It's a little scary hearing that from a big guy like you, but I'm glad you're staying here and can help the people," Gideon joked. "Welcome to Namora Village." 2 days later. Namora Village. Noelle slowly opened her eyes, her weak body still lying on the bed. The elderly woman winced in pain when she saw a transparent tube stuck in her hand, carrying a liquid she didn't recognize. Only Silva was in the room, sleeping on the sofa with a blanket over her. In a hoarse voice, Noelle called out to her. Silva heard the faint sound. She slowly opened her eyes and saw her mother awake, her body thinner and her face pale. Silva shot up from the sofa and hurried to her mother's side. Her hands trembled, her heart raced, and tears streamed down her cheeks as her slender fingers gripped Noelle's hand. "Thank goodness. I'm so grateful," Silva whispered. "What is this thing?" Noelle asked in a raspy voice. "That's an IV drip. Miss Lena put it in for you. She asked you not to remove it." "Lena, huh? Sir Gideon's friend?" "That's right. She came 2 days ago, examined you, and gave you medicine," Silva said. "Not with magic?" Noelle asked. "No, not with magic," Silva answered with a smile, her eyes fixed on her mother's face again. Overjoyed that her mother was conscious, Silva wanted to fetch Lena right away. She told Noelle she'd be back and left the house. Lena, who had been leading the villagers in cleaning up the village, turned in surprise when she heard Silva's voice. It was no wonder. Silva had come out to tell her about Noelle. "My mother, she's awake," Silva said. Lena nodded and told Gideon to bring her medkit. He nodded in understanding. Soon after, Lena and Gideon entered Noelle's home. The bedroom door was open, and Silva sat on a wooden chair beside the bed where Noelle lay. Noelle's face was still pale, her movements weak, and her appetite gone. She turned her head slowly and smiled, happy that Lena had come to help her. "How are you feeling?" Lena asked. "Weak." "That's normal," Lena replied. Gideon stood at the foot of the bed, watching Lena place a stethoscope in her ears. She listened to Noelle's heartbeat and breathing. She then used a flashlight to check her pupils. Lena smiled. Her condition had improved a lot. "What are you doing?" Noelle asked. "Examining you." "In my world, this illness is called typhoid," Lena explained as she removed the stethoscope. "Typhoid?" "Water spirit fever, Mother. Their typhoid is the same as our water spirit fever," Silva said. Then, tell the people to clean." "Don't worry, Lady Noelle," Lena interrupted gently, placing her hand softly on Noelle's chest. "I've already told the villagers to start cleaning the area, separating the livestock, and disposing of waste and manure far away." Noelle smiled, relieved. Lena's help was far more than she could have hoped for. Normally, water spirit fever could be treated, but it came back easily. Noelle wasn't sure if Lena's way could break that cycle. For now, keeping the village and water sources clean was the top priority. Lena also instructed anyone who had been in contact with Noelle to be careful and wash their hands regularly. Silva listened closely. She had been the one caring for Noelle while she lay sick in bed. She would follow Lena's instructions carefully. "I'll prepare an herbal antibiotic for you. Make sure she takes it regularly," Lena said. "Of course, Miss Lena," Silva replied. When they were done with Noelle, Lena and Gideon left. Lena went to the inn to start preparing herbal medicine, while Gideon returned to help in the village. Over time, the village became cleaner. No trash in sight, animal carcasses were buried, and the foul smell disappeared. Gideon was happy, and so were the villagers. "Thank goodness it's all done." "Captain," a familiar voice called. Gideon quickly turned toward the village gate. Luke and Lyra had arrived, wearing their usual outfits, though their boots were caked with mud from checking the river water and soil. Still, Gideon was relieved they were back safe. Nothing bad had happened to them. He hurried over and spoke with them. Lyra opened her pack and showed him 2 small bottles, one with black river water, the other with soil from the riverbank. "Well, how was it?" Gideon asked. "We met Lady Siver and gathered plenty of evidence." Lyra analyzed it quickly, Luke said. "What?" "Mercury lead, and I suspect organophosphates," Lyra explained. "Really? Did you check the ancient ruins?" Gideon asked. Luke shook his head, and Lyra stayed quiet. She hadn't gone there because she feared there might be danger. She also hadn't brought a drone to scout the area. "All right, let's meet tonight to discuss this case." "Understood, Captain." Chapter 40. Night of Plan. Luke and Lyra agreed, heading back to the inn to store their belongings and clean off the mud. Gideon needed to finish the village cleanup before discussing the Lamia case with them. Lena was still busy preparing an herbal remedy made from garlic, turmeric, and honey to serve as an antibiotic and immune booster for Noel. They each did their tasks well. The village surroundings became clean, and Noel's condition began to improve. Lena stepped outside and met Gideon, who had just finished burying animal carcasses. "Take this," Lena said, pulling a handkerchief from her pocket. Gideon smiled. He accepted it and wiped the sweat running down from his head. The sun was almost setting, which meant it was time for him and the villagers to stop for the day and continue tomorrow. "How's Noelle?" Gideon asked. "She's getting better. I already gave 12 pills to Silva. Noelle has to take them twice a day until they're empty." "Doesn't sound like there's anything to worry about," Gideon replied. "Of course. Typhoid can be dangerous if untreated, but I'm a doctor. I can handle it easily," Lena explained. She sighed in relief, and both of them looked ahead, spotting Jack stepping out of his house while handing over repaired tools. The villagers already knew about the arrival of the new blacksmith family. On his very first day opening the shop, many old men had lined up neatly, asking Jack and Sora to fix their rusty, broken farming tools. It was an easy job for the two of them. "He doesn't seem to be struggling at all," Lena noted. Gideon nodded, crossing his arms. With Jack and Sora in the village, he and his team could coordinate more easily whenever they needed something, especially bullets. "All right, let's head back." He and Lena turned around and walked toward the inn to clean up. Inside, Luke and Lyra were already waiting, having finished their own business and now relaxing. Night fell over Nemora village. The villagers began lighting oil lamps to illuminate their homes and streets. Gideon did the same in his room, just as Luke and the others arrived to start their meeting. "So the distance from the Wolf village to the Lamia village is about 1 to 2 days on foot?" Lena asked, and Lyra confirmed. "It's not hard to get there. We just need to follow the dirt trail and cross the river," Lyra replied. "How many Lamia villagers are sick?" Gideon asked. "The Lamia village has 230 people. About 73 of them are sick." That's quite a concerning number. No wonder she pleaded like that," Gideon said. "How long is the river?" he asked. 2.4 kilometers from the river's source. "Only about 700 meters of it is contaminated," Luke replied. "That means the source is still fine." Gideon nodded. He opened the continent map he had once received from Mitsuko, spreading it out on the bed and pointing to the river east of the Wolf village. He tried to confirm. "Is this the river?" Gideon asked, and Lyra and Luke confirmed. "I have 2 plans for this. First plan, we dig a trench to create a new river flow that avoids the ruins. But it'll take a long time without technology." Gideon stopped speaking mid-explanation. His eyes closed, his head moved slightly from side to side, and his breathing ragged. Lyra, Luke, and Lena noticed something was wrong. Lyra gave Lena a quick nod, telling her to calm him down. "Captain, are you all right?" Lena asked. Gideon inhaled for 4 seconds, held his breath for 4 seconds, then slowly exhaled for 4 seconds. The unease in his chest began to fade, and he felt better than before. "I'm fine, thanks, Lena. I'll continue. Second plan, we build a river filtration system and investigate what's happening inside the ruins." Lena and the others went silent, their serious eyes fixed on the continent map spread across the bed. Lena raised her hand to share her thoughts. "The second plan is more realistic. We don't know the water pressure or flow speed." "Lena's right, Captain. We'd at least need an excavator to dig the ground," Lyra added. "Besides, swamp soil is peat, soft and unstable. Better to go with the second plan," Luke agreed. Gideon nodded. It was decided his team would go with the second plan, building a heavy metal and chemical water filtration system while investigating the cause of the contamination from within the city ruins. To make the second plan possible, Gideon and his team needed time to prepare everything. His attention turned to Lyra, the brains behind all the technology they'd need. "Find a blueprint for the water filter. Work with Luke to make it," Gideon ordered. "Yes, Captain," Lyra and Luke replied in unison. A low buzzing sound rang in Gideon's ears, and a flashback hit. Soldiers gathered inside a room in a Middle Eastern city, sitting together exactly like now. It was a painful memory. "Captain, are you good?" one of them had asked. "Target Lion is in sight. We have to eliminate him before the mission extraction time. Watch out for the sand. It's messing us up." Gideon froze again, making Lena and the others focus on him. Lena looked at his hands, trembling uncontrollably as if something terrible was running through his mind. His heart pounded. His hands shook. His thoughts spiraled. He didn't know what to do. Gideon felt lost. "Lena, go to the Kitsune village and ask for their help," Gideon murmured. "Are you all right, Gideon?" Lena asked. "I'm fine. It's just my head hurts," he muttered, unable to continue. His eyes red, Gideon lifted his head and fixed his gaze on Lena. He needed a certain medication that only she could give, something to calm his heart and mind. "Lena, give me propranolol and lorazepam." "Understood," Lena said. She went to her room to get her med kit. Lyra was curious about what was happening to Gideon, but she stopped when Luke blocked her path, shaking his head. He didn't know what was going on either, but he was certain Lyra shouldn't press the matter. Lena returned, giving Gideon a safe dose of the two medicines. Gideon took them one by one. Gradually, his racing heartbeat slowed, and the tremors in his hands faded. He exhaled deeply, standing, while leaning one hand against the inn's hallway wall. Lena noted the symptoms: palpitations, tremors, cold sweat, red eyes, dizziness. Gideon's behavior was also different from usual. She could already guess the cause, though she would need to confirm it. "Could it be that you—" "Can I rest in your room?" Gideon interrupted. Lena went silent, then nodded. Gideon gave a faint smile, stepped inside, and lay down on her bed. Lena stood beside him, arms folded. The lorazepam took effect quickly, making him drowsy and easing him into rest. Lena pulled a blanket over him and let him sleep undisturbed. She stepped out and returned to Gideon's room. Luke and Lyra looked over when they saw the door open. Lena entered with a serious expression, having just finished getting Gideon to sleep. "What's wrong with him?" Luke asked. "I suspect post-traumatic stress disorder." "PTSD?" Lyra asked, shocked. "Yes, many soldiers experience it, especially those stationed on the front lines or in operations. Seeing the captain like this, I think it's caused by many things. Like guilt over losing teammates and civilian deaths can have a deep impact on someone's mind," Lena explained. Luke nodded. He'd once heard Gideon talk about losing team members, but never asked more about it. Now he realized that losing comrades could have such a severe effect. "What can we do?" Luke asked. "For now, I can't leave him alone. We don't know when the trauma might hit again. Just act normal, as if nothing happened. Make him feel comfortable, no matter what. He's our captain. Our leader." "Understood, Lena." Chapter 41. Morning in the village. The next day, Gideon's eyes opened in the morning. He didn't wake up at dawn, but rather when the sun had already risen high. That's right. Gideon overslept. The first thing he felt was dizziness hitting his head. He remembered that last night he had acted strangely, his hands trembling while a strong headache struck him, his heart pounding hard with an anxious feeling haunting him more than usual. He had asked Lena for medicine, and she gave it to him. Gideon remembered what it was: propranolol and lorazepam. Those supplies were mandatory for any medical unit since the stress of war could disrupt someone's mind, causing restlessness and anxiety. Why? Why did those flashbacks appear now? It had never happened before. He tried to stand up and regulate his breathing to keep it steady. Gideon sat at the edge of the bed and noticed a tray of MRE food that had been prepared beforehand. A small note was placed on the nightstand, written directly by Lena. The message's main point was asking Gideon to take a break and eat the MRE. Lena had gone to the Kitsune village to ask for their help, while Lyra and Luke had gone into the forest to search for supplies for their simple filtering device. His plan was to go see Jack, meet Noelle, and beyond. However, his condition at the moment made it impossible for him to do so. He also saw 2 pills still in their packets, one propranolol and one lorazepam. In the last part of the note, Lena asked Gideon to take propranolol if anxiety appeared. But if the anxiety attack grew stronger like the night before, Lena told him to take lorazepam and then head to bed. The effect of lorazepam would put Gideon into a deep sleep. Gideon nodded, fully taking Lena's advice. He tucked the medicine into the pocket of his tactical shirt and slowly began eating the MRE on the tray. Gideon ate while glancing sideways, looking out at the village through the window of his room. The village looked far more orderly than before. The piles of trash and corpses were no longer in sight. They had realized how important cleanliness was after their village head. Noel caught the water spirit fever. Gideon's team had managed to heal Noel without magic, relying only on herbal remedies and diagnostic tools. That was far more impressive and made the villagers realize something. They had to start listening to Gideon's team if they wanted to live longer. Elsewhere, Jack's blacksmith shop wasn't as crowded as yesterday. He had worked non-stop from morning to morning just to fulfill the villagers' requests. Many of their requests were to make new tools or repair old ones. That was certainly easy for Jack and Sora to do. Now, not many were lined up in front of the shop. Sora handled the front counter while Jack focused in the back forging area. After finishing his breakfast, Gideon washed up and got ready to go. He planned to visit Jack's shop and ask about the situation, hoping Jack had a clear answer for his request. Gideon stepped outside in another tactical shirt, patterned in blue and black camo, similar to a Navy uniform. The main procedure Gideon enforced for the entire team was the carrying of the SIG M17. That's right. Every team member was permitted to carry a SIG M17 on their waist with 2 mags, one loaded and one spare. That was a better way to maintain order and deal with minor threats. "Sir Gideon," greeted Sora, standing behind the counter while waving. Gideon smiled, returning Sora's greeting with a small wave. He turned and clearly saw the line inside the shop, though it wasn't as long as yesterday. "Looks like you've been very busy these past 2 days," said Gideon. "They've needed many new tools and repairs. We've even struggled to get any sleep." "Understandable. There are no blacksmiths in Namora. You two are the only ones," replied Gideon. "I'm sure villagers from other places will also come asking for your help. Seems like we'll have to hire new workers if that happens." "What brings you here, Sir Gideon?" asked Sora. "This is about the bullets I ordered. If you're free tonight, I'd like to talk at the tavern." Sora glanced back, clearly seeing his father still hammering metal and shaping the tools into perfect form, just as the customers requested. There was still much work Jack had to finish. But Sora would help him so the job could be done quickly, and both of them could meet Gideon later. Gideon nodded, said goodbye, and walked off to meet Noel. The old woman was still at her home, being cared for diligently by Silva. When he arrived, Noel's guards let Gideon inside. The door opened, and Gideon walked further in until he reached Noel's room. Gideon opened the door and saw Silva speaking with Noel. The old woman's face looked much stronger than before. "Sir Gideon," Silva greeted. "How are you, Silva?" asked Gideon. Silva nodded, showing he was doing well. Gideon glanced sideways, seeing Noel smiling at him. Her condition had improved greatly. Silva had cared for her with obedience and patience. Gideon turned and saw the bottles of medicine had decreased, showing Noel had been taking them. "I'm glad you're getting better." "Thanks to Ms. Lena for healing me," Noel replied. "Lena only gave you the medicine. You were the one who chose to heal. If you hadn't taken the medicine, you would never have recovered." Noel nodded. She was truly grateful to have Gideon's team in her village, something she had never imagined before. Without Gideon's team, it might have been difficult for her to recover so quickly. "What brings you here, Sir Gideon?" asked Silva. "You might have heard about the new blacksmiths named Jack and Sora." Noel confirmed. Silva had told her everything without leaving anything out. She had actually wanted to meet them, but her condition made that impossible. "I brought them here. I had a certain purpose in inviting them, but unexpectedly they've been very helpful to the villagers. We've needed blacksmiths for a long time. I once went to the city and asked them, But none wanted to live in a shabby village like Nemora, said Noelle, raising her head with her eyes fixed on Gideon. Why were they willing to listen to you? Gideon fell silent. He couldn't tell them everything, since that was part of the secret agreement between him and Jack. Gideon could only share some smaller parts that were easier for them to understand. Because they need money. I promised I would pay them if they fulfilled my request. What was that? Asked Noelle. Helping the village and supporting my team's needs. I can't give the exact details. That falls under client confidentiality. Noelle cleared her throat in acknowledgement. She couldn't do much if Gideon didn't want to explain. Still, she wasn't against Jack and Sora's presence. Since they've helped the villagers so much, I won't object to them staying here. Thank you, Ms. Noelle, said Gideon. You're welcome. If you meet them later, please deliver my message to them. Of course, I'll let them know. Chapter 42. All stations. Have a drink. There was nothing else to talk about, so Gideon said goodbye to Noelle. Noelle and Silva nodded. Neither of them escorted Gideon out, since Silva still had to help her mother take her medicine. That afternoon, he had already met Jack and Noelle. An appointment had been set for tonight. Gideon planned to show Jack the bullet blueprint and explain to him what components were inside a bullet. Previously, Lyra had prepared the blueprint, complete with measurements, material details, and so on. She made 2 blueprints for their 2 main rounds, 9mm for the SIG M17 and 5.56mm for the M4A1. Even so, this was neither a rushed project nor a leisurely one. Gideon knew how complicated it was to make bullets, especially to fit the rifle chamber. He was sure there would be many failures in this project. I just hope I can handle those failures so they can turn into the success we want. He walked into the forest to look around, inspecting the watchtowers that had been built. In total, there were 4 towers, 2 to the north and 1 each to the east and west. As for the south, Nemora village did not really need one. Each tower was watched by 1 person on top with a shift system in place. That meant at least 2 guards per tower, 1 for the day and 1 for the night. Earlier, Luke had only ordered them to build the perimeter and towers. He hadn't had time to teach them an early warning system, such as whistle signals and SOS. Gideon stood on the eastern side, calling over the young men assigned to guard the tower. The 4 youths nodded and walked toward Gideon to hear what he wanted. Slowly, he explained the early warning system to notify the people. In this world, they often used bells to announce things, but bell sounds were too similar to church worship bells in the city. Gideon decided to use whistles. They were simple and easy to carry. He blew the whistle, startling the 4 young men in front of him. The sound was sharp and piercing, very different from a bell. If you see a problem, blow the whistle 3 times. Then leave the tower and return to the village, said Gideon. We understand. Only one of the 4 youths received a whistle. For the others, Gideon took them to the inn. There were plenty of whistles there that could be used as the starting system for danger prevention. Receiving the small black item, each of them left the place one by one. Gideon nodded in satisfaction. Teaching them was far easier than teaching the wolfkin. Gideon's attention shifted to the side, spotting a book inside a half-open nightstand drawer. Curiosity crept over him. He opened the drawer and saw a small black notebook kept there. Lena's journal. That's right. It wasn't just any book, but Lena's daily journal, something like a diary. Gideon sighed and put the notebook back into the drawer. It wasn't proper for him to read someone's diary, even if Lena was part of his team. Good manners and discipline had to be upheld. That was the principle of a good and responsible soldier. Are you done, Miss Lena? Asked someone from the village road. Yes. I've gathered the herbs I needed. Lena entered the inn and walked upstairs, holding a wooden basket filled with herbs she had collected. Her steps stopped as soon as she reached her room. Looks like Gideon's already awake. Gideon was lucky. He had made it back to his room before Lena saw him. He had also returned the notebook, so Lena wouldn't suspect anything. I have to keep an eye on him. I don't want his anxiety to relapse, said Lena. She placed the basket on the bed and opened the door. Lena walked toward Gideon's room and opened it. Gideon was there, looking at a blueprint drawn by hand on regular paper, a bullet blueprint. His attention shifted when he saw Lena come into his room. "Lena, so you're here. I thought you went out." "I just got back. I went to see Jack and Noelle." "Noelle?" "Just to ask her permission about Jack and Sora." Gideon's eyes stayed fixed on the book written by Lyra. It wasn't a diary, but the book they used to draft blueprints. They had to use it since they didn't have thermal paper. "Thank you, Lena," murmured Gideon without lifting his eyes. Lena smiled. She understood what Gideon meant by that thank you. To her, it was clear that he must have read the note she had left for him that morning. She stepped slowly and sat at the edge of the bed, looking at Gideon's broad, muscular back through his tactical shirt. "Keep the medicine. If you need it again, let me know." "I understand." "What are you reading?" asked Lena. "The bullet blueprint. I met Sora and arranged to meet them tonight at the tavern. I want to discuss our agreement with them." They're already more than accepted here. It's only right that they work on our request," said Lena. "That's what I think too. There will be many trials where failure and success are both possible," replied Gideon. "We'll find out soon enough." Gideon turned, meeting Lena's round eyes full of concern locked on him. He nodded, responding to her last words. Now it was Gideon's turn to ask about Lena's herb-gathering mission. Lena smiled. Ever since she learned about the chemicals and toxins in the river water, she had begun sorting the possible diseases that could spread from those poisons. There was a saying, "Prepare the umbrella before it rains." Lena applied that saying well. She prepared medicine even before the illness appeared. That was because she could predict it from the situation. "For now, I've gotten the herbs I needed. Hopefully there won't be any autoimmune diseases around here, because those would be difficult to treat," Lena said. "Right. Let's hope this mission can help them." Lena went back to her room to start making simple but necessary medicines, like anti-inflammatory remedies and antibiotics. For more specific diseases, she planned to prepare them directly in Lamia village later. Gideon was outside, circling around to make sure the village was in good condition. He kept at it until evening and night, when oil lamps lit up the town and homes, with people's activities centered in the tavern. Lyra and Luke had already returned to the inn. They had gotten the supplies they needed, but hadn't had time to assemble them yet. Gideon's team gathered again in his room. "Don't assemble it now. Bring the materials to Lamia village. The wolfkin will help," said Gideon. "The kitsune will help too. Lady Mitsuko said she would send 5 kitsune to help me there," added Lena. "Luke and Lyra, you two rest and relax. I'll head to the tavern." "You're going to drink too?" asked Luke curiously. Drinking while talking with Jack? Then let's all go. We need to relax tonight," said Luke, standing up and raising his hand. "I don't drink, but if they have milk, I'll join," said Lyra, still in her quiet manner. "I like their drinks enough. I'll go too," added Lena. Gideon smiled, standing up from the edge of the bed while holding the blueprint book. If his team wanted to relax and come along, then Gideon couldn't stop them. "All right, let's go." Chapter 43, Village Tavern at Night. According to the agreement, the 4 of them left the inn to visit the tavern in the village. They would only go when night came, as agreed for the meeting with Jack and Sora. Gideon hoped Jack could come so that the information given would be complete. However, if only Sora came, it was not a problem either. This meeting in the tavern was only to emphasize Gideon's request and also to ask about the availability of their materials. The sun rolled from above their heads toward the west, a sign that the day would soon end and night would begin. Oil lamps were being prepared along the main road of the village, filled with oil and ready to be lit when night fell. Not only the street lamps, but oil lamps in every house were also prepared. When the darkness of night came, they lit the flames and made their homes shine. On top of that, they took turns lighting the street lamps to help illuminate the village. Nighttime was a sign that the work had ended. Farmers returned from the fields, ranchers brought in their livestock, and the workers began lifting their wooden cups while relaxing and drinking. "What are they doing exactly?" asked Luke, glancing back. He and Gideon stood in front of the inn that night, waiting for Lena and Lyra to come down and join them. They had been waiting for half an hour, but there was still no sign that the two women would come. While waiting, Luke turned and stepped closer to Gideon. Gideon noticed Luke's move, curious about what he was about to do. "What?" "I brought something from Lamia village." "You're going to be surprised," Luke answered. Gideon chose to stay silent, watching Luke. Soon he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box wrapped in green leaves. When Luke opened it, Gideon looked shocked and wide-eyed. "Cigarettes?" Gideon asked. "Right. This is not their product. The Lamia like to use tobacco that they smoke through certain wooden pipes." "So you rolled it straight so it looks familiar to us?" Gideon asked. "Exactly. Stressful work needs a way to relieve stress. This might help you." Gideon took the cigarette wrapped in paper and looked at it carefully. Some of his soldier friends used to smoke. Their reason was always the same. Nicotine gave them calm. There was research about the connection between smoking and the military, but if consumed in peaceful situations, cigarettes could instead cause anxiety after smoking rather than cure it. "I've never seen you smoke before," said Gideon. "I didn't dare smoke in front of you," Luke replied. "What about now?" Luke lifted one cigarette and showed it to Gideon. Gideon nodded while returning the cigarette he had been holding back into the wooden box. He was not interested at all. "Put out your cigarette if there are women or if you're indoors," Gideon said. He lit a wooden match and burned the tip of the cigarette. Luke inhaled slowly. The taste of the tobacco was a little strange, but somehow it was effective in calming him. Lamia's taste of tobacco was the best. Not long after, Gideon turned when he saw Lena and Lyra coming in their tactical shirts. Lena stayed quiet, while Lyra looked shocked seeing Luke standing there with a cigarette between his fingers. "Hey, finally you two took your time," Luke said. "Tiksh," Lyra snapped, stepping up to Luke and grabbing the cigarette from his fingers. With firm hands, Lyra threw the cigarette to the ground and crushed it underfoot. She also demanded Luke hand over all the cigarettes he had. Lyra broke them one by one, which shocked both Gideon and Lena. The two exchanged glances and nodded in response. Lyra had never been that angry before, and if she did, it was only at someone who mattered to her. "Smoking cuts your life short by 20 minutes. Do you want to die early, huh?" Lyra barked. "At least let me finish what I already started." "No, I won't allow it," Lyra said firmly, cutting him off. Gideon stepped in and wrapped his arms around them, trying to calm the dispute. Gideon agreed with what Lyra had said. Smoking was bad for his body, especially since he was smoking near women. "Try quitting." "How about that?" Gideon asked. Luke stayed quiet, then nodded. He was not an active smoker, so he would not get anxious if he didn't smoke for a day. Luke was fine. He could easily break free from nicotine addiction. "All right, I'll try." After things had calmed down, Gideon led his team to the village tavern. He was sure Sora and Jack were already there since the blacksmith had closed. Lena walked beside Lyra, who was still upset, while Luke walked next to Gideon, constantly glancing at Lyra, who for some reason always teased and sulked at him. Gideon gave a small smile. He could not speculate on it, especially since Lyra's behavior was never easy for him to predict. If Luke really wants to know what Lyra is thinking, then he has to talk to Lena. He listened to Gideon's advice. Gideon and his team arrived at the village tavern. Some people turned and looked surprised to see them visit, but the scene relaxed when the tavern owner came out to greet Gideon. "Welcome. Usually only Lena comes here, but it looks like you're interested too, Sir Gideon," said the tavern owner. "Yeah. Have Jack and Sora already arrived?" "The blacksmith?" "He's inside. I think they've been waiting for about 15 minutes. "All right. Give us the same drinks as them. It's all on me," Gideon answered. He handed over 5 silver coins to the tavern owner, a very large amount since the total cost was only 2 silver. Gideon did not mind. Gideon and his team stepped deeper into the tavern and saw Jack and Sora sitting at a table, drinking and eating. Gideon's arrival caught their attention. Jack waved him over to sit at their table. Are you enjoying this village? Gideon asked, sitting down on the wooden chair. I have to admit we are. The villagers are very kind to us, Jack replied. I've met with Madame Noel. She allows you to stay. She also wants to meet you. Really? That's a relief. I thought she hated me since she never came to visit. Her condition is not good. The best choice for her is a total rest, Lena answered. Jack nodded. Previously, he had only met Gideon and Lena, but now he noticed two others he didn't know, Luke and Lyra. Gideon introduced Luke and Lyra when Jack and Sora's eyes turned toward them. While staying here, Sora had kept talking with the villagers and asking about Gideon's team. There was one thing Sora needed to confirm about them. To match the gossip she had heard from the villagers, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? Gideon asked. Are you the ghost team? Sora asked. Ghost team? That's what they call the team that defeated Moko's army in the south. They attacked and disappeared quickly like ghosts. Gideon looked at Lena and Luke. Luke nodded, somehow feeling Jack and Sora could be trusted with this matter. As for technical details and the rest, Gideon would still keep them secret. If that's what they say, perhaps. So what about your request? Jack asked. He smiled, raised a notebook, and showed them the blueprint sketches of bullets. Blueprints for 9mm and 5.56mm rounds, where Gideon had included infographics inside. Jack and Sora leaned toward the notebook, reading it over quickly. Jack began to understand the components. Is this all? Jack asked. Yes. Can you make them? Gideon asked. Of course. This is easy. Sora and I will make them for you, Jack said confidently. Just make one prototype of the two different bullet types. I'll test them later. If you need any materials, tell me. Chapter 44. Stay. Here. Jack asked for the book. He needed to see more clearly what was inside. Gideon had no problem and handed it to him. The man and Sora immediately began talking, discussing something about the materials for each component. Gideon and the others stayed quiet. Watching them talk made him feel calm. He was certain Jack could make bullets just like the ones shown in the blueprint. Can you use a ruler? Gideon asked. Sora can do it. My eyes are blurry. All right. What do you think? Gideon asked. Jack turned, exchanging a look with Sora for a moment to respond to Gideon's question. After feeling sure, both of them looked forward and focused their attention on Gideon. Seeing what Gideon's team had designed made Jack and Sora feel optimistic. They were confident they could make the bullets as Gideon wanted. Between the casing and the projectile, which one needs strong iron? Jack asked. The projectile. That's the main essence of a bullet. Use iron that's easy to shape for the casing, Gideon answered. Their discussion was cut short when a tavern worker came with drinks for Gideon and the others. Gideon smiled, took his drink, and set it on the table. Lena and the others did the same. I'll continue. What you need to pay attention to is the gunpowder and the primer. A bullet doesn't use a fuse, Gideon explained. Yes, I see there's no fuse here, Jack added. The primer is round. It moves when pressed, and that pressure ignites the gunpowder inside the bullet. Do you understand what I'm saying? Gideon asked. Sora nodded. He had never heard of a primer like that before, but maybe his father's experience had taught him something about it. Gideon was pleased to hear that. He lifted his drink and took a slow sip. It felt cool and good in his mouth and throat. Done with the bullet talk, Gideon invited them to move on to other things, maybe about the village and so on. Their conversation became light and easy. While Lyra and Luke chose to chat elsewhere, Gideon and Lena stayed at Jack's table. I've never heard of technology like that before, Jack said. That's because my world is different from this one. It makes sense that you've never known about it, Gideon replied. He finished his drink until nothing was left. The drink was really good, but Gideon did not want to get carried away. It would be bad if he got drunk in this situation, even though they were only relaxing. Lena turned to look at Gideon's face, red and flushed from the alcohol. She also chose to stop drinking before it was too late. Jack and Sora noticed Gideon couldn't handle his alcohol. Looks like he's not used to alcohol, huh? Jack asked. That's strange. He's usually strong. Hey, Gideon. Half conscious, Gideon responded with a cough and a slow nod. He turned and saw Lena beside him, focused on his face. Gideon's lips curved up when their eyes met. "You really are beautiful, Lena," Gideon said. "He's drunk. I have to take him home," Lena said. "What about the book?" Jack asked. "Rip out the blueprint pages and give me the book," Lena replied. Sora tore out the bullet blueprint for them, while the rest of the book was returned to Lena. She stored it away while trying to guide Gideon, but she had another problem. "Hey, Blondie, what happened to Gideon?" Luke slurred, being carried by Lyra. Lena turned and was shocked, surprised that the men were easier to knock out than the women, even though she knew Gideon and Luke were usually heavy drinkers. Seeing the two drunk men made Sora laugh. Jack stood, walked over to Luke and Gideon, and offered to take both of them back to the inn. "Wait, are you sure?" Lena asked. "My father always used to do this back in the city. You don't need to worry." Lena agreed with what Sora said. They left the village tavern to return to the inn. Along the way, Gideon just slept with his head hanging low, unlike Luke, who rambled nonsense about regretting smoking in front of Lyra. Lyra heard Luke's ramblings, her hands clenched and her sharp eyes staring straight ahead, wanting to punch his face. Lena noticed Lyra's behavior and only sighed softly at the sight of both Lyra and Luke. She just hoped Lyra wouldn't kill Luke. When they arrived in Gideon's room, Jack dropped both Gideon and Luke on the bed. Lena thanked Jack. He smiled and said it was no trouble. There was nothing else for him to do, so Jack left the inn. Lyra climbed onto the bed with her hand open. Slap. Lena squinted her eyes at Lyra and Luke's quarrel. There was nothing she could do to stop Lyra. Her attention was focused on Gideon. She brought Gideon into her room, making Lyra pause from slapping Luke and turn to her. "Where are you taking him?" Lyra asked. "My room. I'm worried his PTSD will relapse." "All right." Lena carried Gideon to her room. When she opened the door, she laid him down on the bed and removed his shoes and his Sig M Swess 17. There was no sign that Gideon would wake up from his drunken sleep. Lena sighed. She planned to sleep in Lyra's room tonight. After tucking Gideon under the blanket so he wouldn't get cold, his hand reflexively reached out and grabbed Lena's wrist. Lena was shocked. Her eyes widened at Gideon's subconscious reaction. "What are you?" "Stay here." Lena heard it, even though his voice was faint. She stood still at Gideon's request, even if it was from his unconscious mind. But the subconscious doesn't lie. He might have said that because he was afraid of being alone. Hearing those words made Lena unable to bring herself to leave him alone. Even if she had to sleep on the sofa, it was much better because at least she could be in the same room with Gideon. She locked the door and closed the curtains. Lena lit the oil lamp, making the room feel cozy for resting. Once everything was ready, Lena turned to Gideon and reached out her hand. She gently stroked Gideon's hair, helping him sleep peacefully. "Good night, Gideon." Chapter 45. Operation Blackwater. 3 days later, after preparing everything they needed, Gideon and his entire team were ready. They wore military uniforms in brown with black patterns, fitting for jungle and tropical regions. At a glance, their camouflage would not be easy to spot unless the enemy looked very carefully. They gathered in Gideon's room, where all the equipment was already laid out and waiting to be used. One by one, they began putting on carrier vests and belt holsters, useful for carrying spare mags for the M4A1 and Sig M17. "Vest on, belt on, put mags," Gideon ordered firmly. Lena and the others listened. They understood the command even though it wasn't a recognized international phrase. But as a team that had been together for a long time, they knew Gideon's intent. "Done," Luke replied sharply, followed by the others. M4 check. Safety off, mags on. Ready to use, Gideon continued. Luke did the same, and so did Lena and Lyra. They responded in the same sequence as Gideon, all of them still standing together in a circle inside his room. Gideon nodded. He drew the Sig M17 and holstered it at his right thigh. The others followed. With all main gear in place, They were now truly preparing for their second military operation besides Operation Black Crown. He called this mission Operation Blackwater. Helmet up, NVG on radio connected, Gideon instructed. Falcon, test. Radio clear, Luke replied firmly. All equipment was in place, complete enough to prevent something bad from happening. There was a reason NVGs were used. This mission would take place in the dark. That's right. According to Luke's explanation, Lamia were active at night, so it was the perfect time to start the mission in the dark. They were still in Namora village before heading toward the wolf village. Filters ready? Gideon asked. Ready, Lyra confirmed. Move out. Understood, Captain. Lyra and Luke walked ahead, while Lena and Luke followed behind. The inn receptionist noticed Gideon and his team, surprised to see them wearing gear with so much metal attached. The four of them stepped out of the inn toward the village gate. Gideon stopped when Sora called to him. The blacksmith Jack's shop was close enough to the gate, so it was natural Sora could see him. Whoa, you look different compared to before, Sora said with admiration. Tell Silva my team and I are leaving. We'll be back in 7 days, Gideon replied. Where are you going? Classified. Without further farewell, Gideon continued toward the forest trail. Their NVGs were on, letting them see clearly into the forest. If anything suspicious appeared, they could detect it right away. All four had their flashlights on, making them easily recognizable to both the kitsune and the wolves. As Gideon's team arrived, children from both races saw the gear they wore and were amazed. Bayan, Gideon greeted as Bayan came to meet him. Feels like nostalgia. Am I right? Bayan asked. Don't bring up the past. Can you help me? Gideon asked. Of course. I already promised, didn't I? Not long after, a messenger from Kitsune arrived at the wolf village. Lena turned and waved, greeting Lady Mitsuko, who came with 3 Kitsune women. She lifted her NVGs and looked at Mitsuko directly. Mitsuko explained that the 3 Kitsune women were the best water mages, and they would not be a burden to Gideon. Of course. It will help us a lot if more people are willing to lend a hand. Lady Mitsuko smiled, then shifted her gaze toward Gideon, who was still speaking with Bion while arranging the wolf team that would guide them. Lena noticed Mitsuko's look. She turned and understood what Mitsuko was watching. She offered to help speak with Gideon on Mitsuko's behalf, but Mitsuko declined. I will talk to him later. Good luck with your mission, Miss Lena. After leaving the 3 Kitsune women, Mitsuko departed the wolf village with her guards. Lena stepped closer to Gideon, introducing the 3 Kitsune who would accompany them. Good. After some waiting, Bion returned with a 5-man team. They had been chosen because they knew the eastern region best, and they had also previously guided Luke and Lyra to the Lamia village. They had no complaints. Bion's orders were absolute, and as forest wolves, they obeyed without question. Thank you, Bion. You're welcome. Be careful, Bion replied. Gideon turned to his team and the 3 Kitsune. Luke and the others nodded, putting their NVGs back on to see better at night. The 5 wolves moved to the front, leading them into the forest by a narrow trail. The deeper they went, the colder the wind felt. They had to climb hills and cross rivers before reaching Lamia village. According to Sivir, reaching the Lamia village would take 1 or 2 days of walking. But with the number of people and supplies, Gideon figured it would take 3 days. Each night, Luke, Gideon, and the wolves helped each other set up tents that could fit around 5 people. Lena and Lyra rotated guard shifts with Luke and Gideon every 3 hours. The timing proved right. By the 3rd midday, Gideon stopped as his black boots sank into soft ground, almost tripping him. Peatland. We're close. Lena and the others agreed. The wolves pressed on through the swamp forest until they saw a village with wooden houses and roofs made from dried leaves. Gideon's team stepped out of the forest and arrived at Lamia village. Their sudden presence was enough to make the Lamia villagers frightened and uneasy. Gideon studied them. The ratio of women to men was striking. Women far outnumbered men. What happened to all the men? Are you Gideon? Asked Sivir, stepping out of a large wooden house. He removed his helmet and pulled down his neck buff. His face was revealed before Sivir. He was Gideon, the man the Lamia villagers had been waiting for. Gideon? So he's the human Lady Siver spoke of? What is he planning to do? Many of the villagers whispered among themselves about Gideon and his team. They were curious, even though Luke and Lyra had already been there before. Gideon entered the village, seeing the thin faces of the Lamia people, a clear result of food shortages and malnutrition. If untreated, their condition would only worsen. "Do you mind if I start?" Gideon asked, looking directly at Siver. "Start what?" Siver asked, puzzled. He turned back to his team. There was something that needed attention before dealing with the main problem. Lyra set up a field kitchen and started cooking simple, nutritious meals for the villagers. "Understood, Captain," Lena and Lyra replied, assisted by the 3 kitsune. "Luke and I will begin inspecting the village, checking for early signs of disease. The 5 wolves will stay here and guard the village." "Understood," they responded firmly. Siver and the other villagers were stunned. They had no idea what Gideon was planning. One of them even came up to Siver, urging her to drive Gideon away, afraid he meant to destroy their village. "What exactly are you doing, Sir Gideon?" Siver asked. "Before we deal with the river, we have to take control of the village's problems. I hope you've already stopped using the river water. Do as I say if you and your village want to survive." Chapter 46, Lamia vs. Lizardmen. An emergency kitchen was indeed important when the village situation was unstable. Fortunately for them, Gideon had broad knowledge. The river was a primary need. When that primary need was disrupted, it could have a significant impact. Food was one of them. When Lena arrived in the village, she connected Gideon's words to the reality in the field. She clearly saw many villagers thin and starving, weak and pale-faced. Siver did not know how to deal with this problem. Then Gideon appeared with a solution. She placed much hope in Gideon, believing he could save her and the entire village. It seemed Gideon was not joking about his promise. Looking at the crops and vegetables available, Lena did not choose complicated food. She would make soup with ingredients from the village, hoping it would help the others. Gideon and Luke worked on their tasks, cleaning the surroundings and draining stagnant water. Their only concern was malaria. That's right. Malaria was a disease caused by mosquitoes, usually living and breeding in swamp areas. The Lamia village was the perfect place, with the humidity and temperature just right for mosquitoes to multiply. By clearing out stagnant water, at least Gideon had taken the first preventive step he needed to take. He turned to the side, watching Lena busy cooking food for the villagers. That night, Gideon and the others stayed in the village. Some slept in Siver's house, others slept in tents, right in front of a small campfire. Luke sipped coffee from his cup, while Gideon was still chewing on a wafer snack in his hand. Both of them turned quickly when they heard an explosion that startled them. "Blast. What was that?" Luke asked. "An explosion. It came from inside the ruins." "Luke, grab Lyra's laptop and activate the drone. Scout the ruins," Gideon ordered. Luke agreed. He went into the tent, grabbed Lyra's laptop, and activated the drone they had brought. The laptop powered on and synced successfully with the drone. Slowly, he flew the drone, guiding it with Lyra's laptop. Gideon grew curious, stepping closer to watch the drone feed on the screen. The drone was now on its way to the ruins. It did not take long before the drone hovered above the ruins. What Siver had said was true. It was the ruins of a city, with buildings and roads covered in vines and creepers. "There's no way vines could pollute the river." "I'm right, aren't I?" Luke asked. "You're right. Switch the feed to thermal mode." "All right." Luke switched the feed from normal video to thermal imaging. What appeared on the laptop screen was shocking enough to make both Luke and Gideon's eyes widen and their mouths drop in disbelief. No way. This is insane. Completely insane. What they saw on the screen were images of hundreds of heat signatures inside the city. Only a few lived above the ruins, while most lived underground. Gideon had already suspected it. Fungi did not cause chemical effects on the river, and moss didn't either. He had predicted that some group of people must be polluting the river for their own purpose. "Pull the drone back," Gideon ordered. Luke quickly recalled the drone from above the ruins, preventing anything bad from happening. Soon the drone landed back at their tent and was shut down to save battery. "What are we going to do?" Luke asked. Gideon was silent. He did not know their exact numbers or even exactly what they were, but his best choice was to discuss this with Lena, Lyra, and Siver. He was certain Siver had answers about this. The next morning, the Lamia villagers lined up at the field kitchen where Lena and Lyra were ready to serve food. The 5 wolves worked together to clean the area. Luke and Gideon, already geared up, entered the village and walked to the chieftain's house. "What do you want?" asked the guard at the residence, a Lamia woman. "I want to see Lady Siver. This concerns the ancient ruins." Luke carried Lyra's laptop, storing the reconnaissance evidence from the night before. It had video showing hundreds of monsters roaming the ruined city, both above and below ground. Seeing their determination, the guard agreed. One of them went inside and led Gideon to Lady Siver's study on the 2nd floor. The door opened, and Lady Siver turned to welcome Gideon. He entered in full gear, with Luke following and carrying the laptop. "Do you need something?" Siver asked. "Yes. I need to know what's in the ancient ruins," Gideon said. "I already told you. We've never been there, so we don't know." Gideon turned his head, and Luke nodded. He opened the laptop and showed her the drone footage from the night before. Siver squinted, not knowing what it meant. "What is that?" "Red means living creatures. There are hundreds living underground. I'm certain they're the ones polluting the river," Gideon explained. "Do you know them?" Luke asked. Siver shook her head. From what they saw, their forms resembled lizards, with the tallest ones around 2 meters. Siver realized that lizardmen and Lamia had never gotten along. "Could they be lizardmen?" "Lizardmen?" Gideon asked in shock. "Yes, an annoying lizard race. We've always been enemies with them. From their forms, I'm sure they're lizardmen." "Damn lizards," Siver cursed. Gideon stayed silent. He did not know there was a lizard race in this world, but it all made sense, considering this was a fantasy world. What he thought about now was how to solve the problem without committing genocide. It would be difficult, but Gideon had to try. If there was truly a way to reconcile and make them live together, then he had to find it. "All right, that's all I need," Gideon said. He took his leave, walking out with Luke to return outside. Luke shook his head, never expecting their enemy to be another race. "What are we going to do?" Luke asked. Gideon cleared his throat quietly, his mind working hard to figure out how to end this mission. If he gave the order to raise weapons, hundreds of lizard people would die, and it would not be worth it. Lena noticed Gideon's troubled face. She stepped closer and brought them MREs, which were more suitable than the soup earlier. The soup was meant for the Lamia. "What's wrong?" "Your faces are already tense this early in the morning?" Lena asked. "We're thinking about lizards." "Lizards?" Lena frowned. "Yeah, lizards." Chapter 47. Gideon Crazy Plan. "What are you really talking about?" asked Lena. Gideon smiled. He glanced briefly at Luke, giving him a hand signal to return to the tent. Luke understood, nodded, and walked away from the village, leaving Lena alone with Gideon. "Last night, Luke and I heard an explosion coming from the ruins of the city. I decided to deploy a drone to scout the area." "What did you find?" asked Lena, curious. "Lizards. Some kind of lizardmen race living in the city sewers. There are hundreds of them." "Lizardmen? Do such things really exist?" "Don't forget we're in a fantasy world. Anything can happen," Gideon replied. Lena nodded. Seeing Lamia, a half-human, half-snake being, had already been enough to shock her. Now Gideon was saying there were lizardmen living in the sewers beneath the ruins of the city. That was far beyond her imagination as a human. But Gideon would not tell her something like that without having solid proof of their existence. Lena kept looking straight ahead, clearly seeing the serious look on Gideon's face. He only looked like that when he was thinking hard, putting together a plan. Operation Blackwater was no longer just about saving the villagers and the river. It now had the potential to become a war between races. If that happened, there would only be chaos and inevitable destruction. Gideon was already trying to figure out the best way to stop the war. Could the lizard men be the ones who polluted the river? Lena asked. Gideon nodded, then explained what Lady Siver had told him and Luke earlier. It was about the beginning of the hostility between the Lamia and the lizardmen. Lena listened carefully, her sharp mind able to put the pieces together. My guess was right. The lizardmen poisoned the river to drive the Lamia out. That has been their tactic from the start, Lena concluded. So what are we going to do? She asked again, turning her eyes back to Gideon. Gideon let out a deep breath. With things already like this, as the leader of a tactical military team, he had to pay attention to several things, one of them being how to form the right kind of alliance. The Lamia and the lizardmen had nothing to do with Gideon personally, but he had to calculate the best way to win this case. To do that, Gideon had to study the roots of the conflict between the two races, who started it, who kept fueling it. To uncover that, he needed to bring together both versions of the story, from the Lamia and from the lizardmen. I may have the best plan for this tonight. Gather in the tent. Yes, Captain. Lena excused herself to return to the common kitchen, where she would tell Lyra about Gideon's orders. That afternoon, Lyra and one of the kitsune were able to handle the cooking. That gave Lena time to do her work, providing medical care to the Lamia races. She was not alone. 2 kitsune came to help her. Following Lena's instructions, the sick were separated from the healthy. The villagers were also told to start cleaning their homes and surroundings. They listened, even though before this they had refused the humans' presence, fearing they would take over the village. In reality, the humans came with good intentions, giving food, cleaning the area, and healing the sick. The fear of the Lamia villagers began to fade, replaced by respect. Their work went on until sunset. Torches were lit to brighten the area, and Lena stepped out of the emergency tent after treating patients. She removed her white gloves and mask, finished with her duties. Following Gideon's orders, she went toward his tent and saw Lyra was already there. Lena was the last to arrive, and Gideon welcomed her with a smile. "So, how is it?" asked Lena as she accepted a cup of hot chocolate from Lyra. "I plan to side with the Lamia, even with the lizardmen out there," Gideon answered. "What do you mean?" asked Lena. "At first I thought about siding with them after I learned they had a large population. The mythic kingdom needs strength, and the lizardmen have it. But then I looked at the condition of the Lamia. They have been wounded and suffering for years, with only a few men left among them. They can hardly fight anymore. I realized something when I compared the two races. The lizardmen are brutal. If they have so many people, why didn't they just wipe out the Lamia instead of poisoning them?" Gideon asked. "I don't know. Because they are afraid of the Lamia. I don't know what kind of power the Lamia have that would make the lizardmen afraid." "Are you making a plan?" said Siver's voice. Surprised, Gideon turned and saw Lady Siver coming into their camp alone, without anyone with her. Gideon stood up and invited her to sit down. Lady Siver admitted she had come to tell them many things, especially about the conflict between the Lamia and the lizardmen. Siver did not hesitate to share, because she believed Gideon and his team needed that information. Gideon and the others listened. The beginning of the conflict between the Lamia and the lizardmen started when the Lamia came to the swamp and decided to settle, while the lizardmen lived elsewhere. Seeing that the Lamia village was more prosperous made the lizardmen jealous. They launched the first war against the Lamia, but the Lamia won. Out of 5 wars, the lizardmen only won once. The Lamia won the rest. The last war was 100 years ago, at the peak of Lamia's power. But since the river became polluted, the Lamia village declined until many of them died. Gideon glanced at Lena. She nodded, feeling the same things Siver felt. With Siver's explanation, Gideon finally had a foundation to act on. He had already set his target. "I hope you can help us." Lena was moved. She stepped closer to Lady Siver and hugged her tightly, trying to ease her worries. Gideon saw her sadness. What had happened to the Lamia made him even more determined to finish this mission. "Don't worry, we will help you," Gideon said. "If you succeed in helping us, I am willing to follow you." "Don't think about that. You should go back and rest tonight," Gideon replied. Lady Siver nodded. She wiped her tears and took her leave from Gideon's team. Lena walked her back, then returned and joined the planning. "So, are we going to kill those lizards?" asked Luke. If we kill their leader, a new one will rise. They are solitary creatures, Gideon answered. Right, not like ants. So what then? Luke asked. Gideon fell silent, glancing from time to time at the river that flowed past the ancient ruins. An idea crossed his mind, something that might work to drive the lizard men away. It was better than killing them all. There's no other way. That's the only thing I can think of. What is it? Luke asked, even more curious. We drive them out by flooding the sewers, just like Noah's flood. Yeah, Noah's flood, chapter 48, Sewers and Ruined City. That night, Gideon and his team began forming small squads with different tasks. Luke had once helped architects build city layouts and such, so he was familiar with sewers. Not all sewers led directly to a river, but most implementations supported that fact. With his basic knowledge of sewers, Luke could help them. Gideon took a book and pen, sketching 3 locations: the city ruins, the river, and the lizard men's lair. If Lady Siver's words were true, there was a chance the lizard men had made the sewers their home. There were plenty of supplies to survive down there, and that was one of the reasons Gideon wanted to flush them away, with the hope that it would shatter the lizard men's will. We have a much better way to drive them out without using our weapons. Tomorrow, Lyra will send a drone toward the city to locate their floodgates. It's possible they closed them with something to keep the river from flowing inside, Gideon explained. I see. When the floodgates are found, the drone will return and map the location. From what I learned from Lady Siver, the lizard men are active at night. Luke and I will go there with full gear. We'll plant C4 on the floodgate to blow apart whatever is blocking the river flow into the sewers. Lena, you stay here and help Lyra. We won't be long, Gideon said. Understood, Captain. Gideon smiled, tore the paper, and burned it in the campfire. For Luke and the others, this task seemed much easier, but it was more complicated to think through. Hopefully what Gideon had in mind would turn out the way he imagined. Meeting dismissed. Get some rest. Lena cleared her throat, stood up, and motioned for Lyra to follow. The 2 of them left Gideon's camp to head toward Lady Siver's residence to rest. Luke watched them leave, then started asking Gideon about his plan. Are we going to drown them? Luke asked. I want to flood the place and keep the river water flowing, so it can't be inhabited again. Actually, by destroying the floodgate, the sewer will always be filled with river water. But high flow might collapse part of the city. Controlling the flow, huh? Luke smiled and patted Gideon's shoulder lightly. He was sure the 2 of them would figure out the answer later. Gideon nodded. There was no use worrying about it too much. He had to rest and prepare for tomorrow's mission. If this mission succeeded, Gideon could move on to the final stage, which was filtering the river water. For some reason, Gideon felt nervous about this mission, even though he had carried out many dangerous ones before. This time, he felt he had to get it right if he wanted to survive. Just fear, nothing more. The next day, as planned, Gideon and Luke were already in uniform with full gear, complete with M4A1 rifles and C4 for the critical task. Lena helped adjust Gideon's helmet and vest. Lyra, aren't you going to help me? Luke whined. Shut up, Lyra snapped. Not long after, 2 drones took off from the Lamia village. The villagers stared in disbelief, their eyes fixed on the metal machines flying in the morning sky. Lady Siver grew curious and crept closer to Gideon. What is your plan, Sir Gideon? Lady Siver asked. Gideon turned and smiled. He explained the outline of his plan to her, trying his best to use simple language she could understand. In short, he and his team would flood the sewers beneath the ruined city. Hearing that, Lady Siver was left stunned. The idea of drowning a city had never even crossed her mind before. How do you intend to flood the city? Lady Siver asked. We'll use the river. Lady Siver turned her head and shook it in disbelief. She never imagined Gideon and his team planned to sink a city with nothing but the river. She still could not fully grasp the core of his plan. Eyes in the sky, Captain. Map the river flow. Find the floodgates. Copy, Lyra replied firmly. Luke finished with his gear and walked over to Lyra to watch the search process on her laptop. Lady Siver's curiosity pushed her closer as well. and she gasped in shock when she saw what was on Lyra's screen. What is that? Sivir asked, confused. Calm down, let us finish our mission, Gideon said, looking at her. How skilled are your people with spears? Gideon asked again. Fairly skilled. Order the able villagers to take up spears and stand by the riverbank? For what purpose? You'll find out soon enough. Lyra raised her hand, signaling Gideon's attention. He walked over, geared up and ready, and she held up her laptop to show the location of the floodgates. Not one, but two different gates. The river split the city down the middle, with a west gate and an east gate. From what Gideon had seen with thermal vision yesterday, most of the lizard men were concentrated in the western sewers. He would probably open the west gate first to deal with their main problem. Look, Captain, there's a valve pipe, Luke pointed out. That could be a tool to control the water flow, Luke added. Gideon nodded, glad to finally have an answer to his earlier question. With the location confirmed, he and Luke readied themselves with their gear. Be careful, both of you, Lena said, her sad eyes fixed on Gideon. We'll be back quickly. You don't need to worry. After their goodbyes, Gideon and Luke stepped into the swamp forest, aiming for the ruined city. Suppressors were mounted on their M4A1 rifles, useful for muffling sound and avoiding attention. There were many ways to enter the ruined city, but the closest for Gideon and Luke was the west gate. They stopped. Gideon crouched and used his helmet scope like binoculars. How is it? Luke asked. Negative. No one there. Stay close, Gideon ordered, and Luke acknowledged. They emerged from the swamp and set foot on the dirt road. Moving quickly and quietly, they avoided drawing attention. Gideon focused forward, Luke covering the rear. 1.2 kilometers to the checkpoint. Fire only if the target is clear. Roger that, Captain. Chapter 49. Target destroyed. All clear. In a two-man formation, Gideon and Luke stepped into the ruins of the city. The air there felt heavy and unpleasant. The ruined buildings, crumbled with age, and vines creeping across stone had become the normal sight of the place. Gideon's steps stopped for a reason. He stood at the city center, right in the middle of the main road overgrown with shrubs and tall grass. So far, they hadn't seen any lizard men. Gideon and Luke only spotted stones, fallen walls, and weeds that reached the waist of a grown man. Are they hiding underground? Luke asked. Could be. Luke turned, watching Gideon kneel and open his pack. Without needing an order, he already understood what Gideon was about to do. He was setting up a small drone to release into the city. The ruins were too wide for just 2 drones to cover certain areas. Fortunately, Lyra carried small palm-sized drones for extra recon. Black Hornet Nano, an effective silent recon drone, almost impossible to detect. Gideon took out 3 of them and linked them with the signals from the 2 larger drones. Slowly, the rotors spun, showing that all 3 were connected. Drone up. Ready for recon, Gideon reported. Vision received. Mapping the outer area. Lyra replied from the command post. He cleared his throat, strapping his pack on again, while his eyes shifted to Luke, who looked more tense than usual. Gideon patted his shoulder lightly, trying to calm him down. Because it wasn't just Luke who was tense. Gideon felt the same. This was their first mission against a mythological race. Nothing was easy the first time except sex. Stay frosty, Luke. Eyes up, Gideon ordered. Roger that. They continued moving forward with rifles raised and safeties off. Both of them walked cautiously through the ruined city, staying centered to avoid ambush. For guidance, Lyra was ready on the radio, telling them when to turn and when to stop. Thanks to the drone imagery above the city, their recon was far easier. Lyra narrowed her eyes. Clear on her screen, several red enemy markers were moving toward Luke and Gideon's position, closing in from behind. We got movement. 6 o'clock. Her warning made them spin around and take position. Lyra was right. 6 lizard-like monsters covered in rotting green slime were approaching. Lyra, watch our backs. Roger that, Lyra answered. Stop and don't move, Luke shouted, speaking in the local language, hoping they could understand. "Who are you?" one lizard man demanded, its sharp eyes fixed on Gideon. "You must know the Lamia, the race you've oppressed brutally. Why don't you try to make peace and live together?" Gideon asked. "They came to take our land, drove us out with their power, and forced us to live our whole lives in filthy sewers," the creature growled. Gideon fell silent. He didn't know what version of truth the lizard men believed, but hostility and vengeance weren't justified. "I'll stop this if both the Lamia and the lizard men are willing to make peace and forget the past," Gideon declared. "No, you can't. They're deceitful." Lady Siver snapped after hearing Gideon's words. He paused, hearing her voice, but kept his eyes locked on the lizard man leader speaking to him. "The only peace for us is the end of that snake race." The lizard men spat, refusing to be swayed. There was no point in reasoning with them. Leaving them unchecked would only make things worse. "Luke, prep the charge. I want C4 on that choke point, dual primed. Keep it cold until my call." Hearing Gideon's order, Luke asked Lyra to guide him to the water gate, staying on radio with Gideon as he moved out. He left Gideon alone to face the 6 lizard men. "Are you helping the snakes?" one asked. "I'm helping peace. If you want peace without killing, then I'm willing to help you," Gideon answered. "The Lamia deserve their freedom," Gideon said firmly. "Ha, words I haven't heard from you in a long time, a true patriot," Luke teased through comms, making Lyra and Lena laugh at another station. "Stay sharp, lads." With Lyra's guidance, Luke found the water gate at the riverbank, shaped like a tunnel about 2.5 meters tall. From his view, a massive boulder was blocking the water from flowing inside. If the rocks were removed, the river would flood the sewers, flushing the lizard men out of the ruins. "C4 has been planted. Setting demo now." "Timer or remote?" Luke reported. "Timer. 30 secs. Regroup at Rally Point Bravo," Gideon answered. "Copy. Move out." Luke pulled back toward the designated rally point at the west gate. Gideon knew the demo was set, and he had time to escape before detonation. C4 wasn't just any explosive. It was designed for whatever his team needed to blow. That gate's obstruction was strong and nearly impossible to break otherwise. C4 was the best option. "What's happening?" the lizard man asked, still standing before Gideon. "Just a small problem. Maybe you should go and save them," Gideon replied. "Who?" Blast. The timer hit 0, the explosion shattering the boulder and nearby structures, rupturing the valve pipe and forcing river water to surge down into the sewers. Gideon glanced back, a red glow lighting the ruins, smoke rising high. "What the?" Gideon reached for his belt holster, pulling out a smoke grenade. As the lizard men panicked, he yanked the pin and threw it forward. The canister spewed thick smoke, blinding their vision. Seizing the moment, Gideon rushed into an alley, moving toward the rally point. "Lyra, help me out." "Roger, Captain." With Lyra's guidance, Gideon cut through alleys, leaping over fallen stone and slipping between broken walls until he reached another main road. Success. He emerged onto the street leading to the West Gate rally point, but his eyes sharpened. More lizard men spotted him. Bang! Without hesitation, Gideon squeezed the trigger, sending 5.56 rounds into their bodies. Their frames were too big to fall from one hit. It took 5 to 7 rounds to bring each one down. "Hit their eyes. That's their biggest weakness," Lady Siver warned. "Eyes?" Gideon shifted his aim to their heads, firing into their eyes. She was right. The bullets destroyed the tissue inside, dropping them dead. "It's like fighting zombies, only with thick scales." "Avoid contact. Meet Luke at Point Bravo," Lena ordered. "Copy." Gideon kept moving, taking advantage of their weakness. At times he pulled the pin on a flashbang or smoke grenade, blinding them further. It worked. Up ahead, Luke was already at the west gate, rifle raised, targeting the lizard men chasing Gideon. "Keep moving. I'm covering," Luke called. Gideon grunted in reply. Soon enough, Gideon broke free of the ruins, sprinting with Luke into the swampy forest. The lizard men stopped chasing, their sewers already flooded by river water that pushed them out of their lair. Swept away by the current, they clawed for the riverbanks. But that became the Lamia's task. Lady Sivir saw the chance and ordered her people to ready their spears. "Kill them when they reach land," Sivir commanded, and her people obeyed. Lena stood and walked to the riverbank, Lyra doing the same after recalling her drones from the ruins. The two women helped the Lamia strike down the lizardmen trying to escape. "This is insane. We're killing them all," Lena muttered. "If we don't, they'll do the same to the Lamia," Gideon answered. "We have to choose who survives and who dies. The Lamia are better than the lizardmen," Gideon added. Mission over. Chapter 50. Operation Blackwater complete. Return to base. Gideon and Luke returned to the Lamia village. Luke turned and saw the Lamia finishing their last task, wiping out the remaining lizardmen who were still alive. Lena and Lyra helped as well. They fired on the lizardmen that reached the shore. With a few shots, they fell and collapsed on the ground. Lyra pushed their bodies back into the river. Together with the Lamia, they carried out that cleanup for 5 long hours. Lady Sivir ordered her people to patrol and kill any lizardmen that managed to escape. The evening light began to appear, just as the situation in the Lamia village grew calmer. Gideon and Luke returned in good condition, unhurt and uninfected by the river water that had been tainted. They sat in front of their tent eating MREs. Luke had to admit he was tired of eating the same rations again and again. But Lyra smiled and offered him a choice. "Do you want to try eating bugs?" she asked. "Oh, of course not. Meal rejected by everyone is better than bug soup." Gideon and Lena laughed at Luke and Lyra's exchange. The two of them always argued over certain things, but strangely they always made up and stood ready for each other after everything that happened. There was no hostility between them. Instead, it was proof of their closeness. Gideon realized this after watching Luke and Lyra interact and work together so much lately. Lena chose not to disturb them. She preferred to talk with Gideon about something else, of course relating to their real mission here. "We wait 3 days after the lizardmen are gone. If the river water turns clean again or not, only time will tell," Gideon said. "You're right. We all know the lizardmen were the cause of the river being poisoned. With them gone, the chances of the river becoming clean again are high," Luke explained. "Stay alert. I'm worried some lizardmen escaped and are planning something," Gideon replied. "Do you know something?" Lena asked. "It's certain the hundreds swept away were those living in the sewers, but don't forget the ones in the ruins." "Oh, that? You don't need to worry, Gideon. Lady Sivir went with her people to check the ruins," Lena answered. "She went, but didn't the Lamia oppose going there?" Gideon asked. Lena shook her head. During the cleanup earlier, Lena had advised Lady Sivir about the superstitions Lamia believed. All of them had been shaped by the lizardmen, keeping the Lamia away from the ruins and stopping them from defeating them sooner. Luckily, she listened to me. She had the courage to go to the ruins and prove those superstitions false, Lena explained. "I'm worried something might happen to her," Gideon muttered, then looked at Lyra. "Boot up the laptop. Launch the drone." "Understood, Captain." Lyra activated the drone and opened her laptop. She sent the drone toward the ruins in power-saving mode. That way, it could fly for about 30 minutes before running out. On the screen, Gideon and the others could see Lady Sivir inspecting the place. Several Lamia with her strangled the lizardmen with their bodies, weakening them before stabbing their heads through with spears. "Looks like there's nothing to worry about." Lyra nodded, pulling the drone back and shutting it off. Lena smiled, relieved the main problem with the river's contamination had been handled. Following Gideon's orders, they would wait several days to see if the river changed. If it didn't, Gideon had another plan. He would begin purifying the river with a water filter system. Luke already had the equipment, it only needed to be set up. "For now, let's focus on cleaning the river. I hope all of you are ready." 3 days later, Lamia village. Gideon's guess was wrong. He and his team stood by the riverbank, seeing the water still dirty, not fully restored. There was no other way. They had to set up filters until the river healed on its own. Luke and Lyra obeyed Gideon's orders. They assembled a river filter made of long cloth filled with sand, gravel, charcoal, clay, and coconut fiber. Gideon turned to Lena, asking how to deal with the chemicals trapped in the water. I do know remedies for lead, mercury, and organophosphate. But that only works in the body. And for the river? I don't know. Gideon nodded. He, Lena, and Lady Siver walked toward the end of the river, where the swamp met the ruins. Luke tied the filter to a tree, followed by Wolfkin and Lamia, tying the other side to another tree. Lyra approached Gideon. She had studied chemistry back in high school. Luckily, she still remembered some of it. Captain, Lyra called. What is it, Lyra? The filter will only handle waste from the ruins. We need to take care of the chemical toxins settled in the river, she answered. Do you have a solution? Lead can be bound with charcoal, Lyra said. Lena agreed and confirmed her words. In traditional medicine, charcoal was often used to bind lead in the body. It might work in water as well. All right. And? Mercury can be trapped by water algae. Interesting idea, Lena noted. And organophosphate breaks down in heat. She means sunlight, Lena added. Gideon nodded in agreement. It makes sense. Organophosphates are weak to sunlight because of photodegradation. UVB and UVC carry enough energy to break the phosphorus-oxygen and phosphorus-sulfur bonds in those compounds. That makes them split and dissolve into the water, Lena explained. Gideon smiled. He felt lucky to have friends like them. Lena and Lyra were sharp and skilled in chemistry. That helped him greatly now. So what do we need to do? Gideon asked. Spread charcoal into the river. Bring algae to the banks. Cut tree branches to let sunlight through, Lyra explained. Can you explain it to them, Gideon? Lena asked. Oh, of course. Leave it to me. Lena and Lyra smiled, turning back to the large cloth stretched as a temporary water filter until the river flow at the Lamia village cleared. Gideon walked toward Lady Siver, his arrival drawing her attention. She had grown far warmer toward him, realizing how much he had helped her people. Are you planning to demand your promise from me? Siver asked. What? I already said it. I will join in your plan for unity. Yes, that's a relief. But there's something else I need to tell you, Gideon replied. What is it? Siver asked curiously. He explained everything Lyra had said. The Lamia woman listened, fully understanding his words. If it could help heal the river faster, she was willing to do it. Of course, I will do it. Lady Siver turned and commanded her people to work just as Gideon directed. They obeyed without hesitation. For them, it was easy work. Gideon felt satisfied seeing the Lamia begin to move and restore their environment. Things grew calm and peaceful. Some villagers recovered from their sickness. The river showed early signs of healing, though it would take time. The filters stood ready, straining whatever came from the swamp. Gideon and his team packed up, taking down the tents and stowing their gear. Their task in the Lamia village had come to an end. He stood before Lady Siver and held out his hand. With respect, she took it. It is an honor for us, the Lamia, to work with and follow you, Sir Gideon, Lady Siver said. Don't see me as your master. See us as your friends. A friend always helps another friend in need, Gideon told her. His words left Lady Siver stunned, deeply moved. Friends, I understand. The river will recover in a few weeks. I hope you can be patient. Of course, we can wait. Gideon released her hand and walked out of the village, waving goodbye. Out of the 7 southern races, 3 were already with him. He only needed to convince 4 more. He didn't know what would come next, but Gideon only hoped he could help more of the struggling races. The journey to the Wolfkin village in Namora took 3 days on foot. Gideon and his team were exhausted, longing for a bed to collapse into. But they stopped when Gideon saw Norton Ashfield waiting in the village. He looked as if he had been expecting someone. What's going on? Gideon asked, greeting him wearily. I need you and your team. The 3rd princess of the Moko kingdom has been kidnapped by rebels.